cancel or wipe away, or if I could just do the snap that Thanos did, I would get rid of every franchise reboot post probably 92.
Welcome to Raw Rant, my friends.
All right, greetings, you sweaty pop culture junkies, and welcome to Raw Rant
for me,
where the truth will set your spirit free or really piss you off. We're here hanging out with some of your favorite nerds to hopefully stimulate your brains and recharge your geeky souls. Welcome to the host. I'm your host, Shane, and with me as always, making your visual and audio experience exciting is my brother, Brian.
Hey.
Also with us tonight is the Puppy Whisperer, directly from the Burnett work, the most famous three-named person on YouTube, the Robert Meyer Burnett.
Thank you. I just fed the puppies.
Also with us, hailing from deep in the salt mines of eastern Las Vegas, author of the Earthman Jack books from the Salty Nerd podcast, Matthew Kadish.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Wait, that's all you get, Matthew?
What's that?
A bummer.
And tonight's special guest.
You know what? Can I just say that applause sounded like the same applause as when Daisy Ridley walked out and they announced a new Ray movie.
Oh, shit.
There's a little bit more booing in that applause, though.
Wow.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And tonight's special guest, you've just heard him on Raw Rant. You may have seen him on FX, Stars, IFC, or G4 TV's Attack of the Show. Creator of Film Threat, he has a new documentary coming out telling the epic story behind G4 TV and Attack of the Show. Film expert and self-proclaimed indoorsman, Chris Gore.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm a little embarrassed. I'm not on I'm literally sitting on my couch working because I have this movie coming out in 2 weeks, and I'm it's a lot. It's a lot. Rob, you know, you have released films before. It's one thing to make a movie, and then releasing it is like a whole other job.
Yeah, and we didn't have the marketing budget that we could have used, so it was all guerrilla. We had people on the streets in New York passing out flyers to come see our movie at the AMC in Times Square when it opened last year, or in 2021.
Nice.
And
my marketing,
do it yourself.
I know what you mean. Like, my marketing budget is sitting on the couch doing all the work, which is me. That's the marketing budget. Me doing all the pimping of this movie. So there you go.
With the tools we have at our disposal, the internet, it can be very effective.
I think so too. I mean, definitely when it comes to indie filmmakers, there's way more possibilities these days for distribution and whatnot. But it is a job, man. It's a job for sure.
Well, we are going to talk all about it, but quickly before we jump into the panel, a bit of business. We made an announcement last week that there would be a really cool one-day film festival happening here later this month, and it's been canceled. Never underestimate Hollywood's ability to shake a legal stick at you.
And it's gone.
Although we are planning something else, less potentially litigious, so stand by for that. Also, I want to.
It reminds me of that South Park episode where he invests in money. He's like, "All right, I'm investing here in the 401k, and it's gone."
That feels like the stock market these days. Also, I want to thank, speaking of money, I want to thank Extra Wallets for sponsoring today's show. This is quite simply the best wallet I have ever owned, and it will likely be the last wallet you'll ever need. It's a smart wallet that is efficient, super slim, sleek, and futuristic, made with Italian leather, space-grade aluminum, and carbon fiber with built-in RFID blocking to protect you from wireless theft. It comes with a tracking card like Brian, because he's always losing his wallet. So in case you misplace it, check out Extra Wallets right after this video in the description below. Go to shop.extra.com/thepopcast and get 25% off your order when you use code ThePopcast. The link is in the description below. Now, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. We are excited to talk some Star Trek Picard Season 3 with you, but we first want to talk about this really cool thing that you have going on. You got a new documentary coming out later this month. It's called Attack of the Doc, written and directed by yourself, and it answers the question, what really happened to G4 TV and Attack of the Show, which arguably took nerd culture mainstream. Can you tell us about this awesome film that you've created, sir?
Well, I was actually hired on Attack of the Show in March of 2005. A guy named Gavin Purcell hit me up, and because I'd done some TV stuff with him, and he said, look, I want you to be on this show because I was a viewer of the screensavers and I watched X Play. I loved G4 TV. I thought it was great. And so to be on the show was awesome. I was on 3 episodes of the screensavers. He goes, look, we're going to relaunch the show. It's going to be a little bit different. We're calling it Attack of the Show. And I thought it was the stupidest name I had ever heard. It since grew on me, and I think on an audience of people. And, it was canceled in like 2012, late 2012. More episodes ran in 2013. But, there's a story behind everything that happened behind the scenes, and through archival footage and interviews with people behind the scenes, the crew, executives and whatnot, I'm seeking to tell this untold story and also kind of remind people of why G4 built up a fandom. G4 built up a huge fan base, and people were kind of disappointed with the relaunch. I think part of that has to do with they made some missteps, which, look, people are allowed to make mistakes, right? It really took like 5 years for G4 to get any momentum, and the new G4 didn't even get a full year. But the one thing that I think was a big mistake was kind of shunning the legacy of the old G4, which is the reason they have fans to begin with. So by making this doc, I'm kind of reminding people like, hey, this is a time when TV, it's weird to look back on Attack of the Show and think that's dangerous television. We never thought it was dangerous when we were doing it. But I look back on it now and it's like people look at it and they go, well, this is all very dangerous. There's a whole segment in
problematic.
There's a whole segment in Attack of the Doc where they did a thing where they took an internet server and they put it up someone's ass. And then if you went to a website called yourassgotserved.com, you would have pinged that your signal would have pinged up that guy's ass. It was behind a curtain. They never showed who it was. I actually know who it was. But that was like one of the segments on the show, which was crazy. By the way, I've since purchased yourassgotserved.com. Points to attackofthedoc.com.
Nice.
So you can go to yourassgotserved.com and it points to attackofthedoc.com. Anyways, so the purpose of this doc is for twofold. One, and Rob, because Rob and I are probably the eldest amongst this group of.
My God.
I'm the only one who doesn't have a beard. That's why I'm not on camera. I'm not allowed to.
God.
I'm not unbearded. But, there was a time when geek culture was not cool. There was a time when a sighting of a girl at San Diego Comic-Con was like seeing Bigfoot. It was just a rare occurrence. And, and look, I remember being ashamed that I had like 6 long boxes of comics. I went to the comic store every week, long boxes everywhere. I built Aurora model kits when I was a kid. I had newspaper routes because I wanted to buy a VCR and comic books and video games and movies and whatnot. And movies were not cheap back then. Rob, you well know the time
they were not.
The manufacturer suggested retail price of Superman the movie was like $100 and $108 like $70s. It's 79, 1980. Crazy times, but geek culture was not cool. And what happened with Attack of the Show is the show and the network kind of paralleled the mainstreaming of geek culture. Now, freaking someone can go see any Marvel movie, go to Target, get a Marvel t-shirt, and they're a geek.
Right.
We lived through a different time where it was not cool to be a nerd. You were bullied for being a nerd or for liking certain things. So G4 kind of was the comeuppance of nerd and geek culture. And so the movie deals with stuff like that. As much as like, and I'm sure you watched the trailer, it looks like an episode of Jackass, but there are deeper layers to the documentary getting into what I just described.
Yeah, we are going to go look at the trailer here in a minute, but do you think, here's a question for you. Because of, at the time when the internet was so new and G4 was coming out and things were so crazy, do you think they really could have succeeded during the return? I know it all was like a giant explosion, but do you think they could actually have returned considering where, the culture that we're in now?
I don't know. I think that what you have to do is not care. I really do. Because if you look at the movies that are the most successful at the box office, Super Mario, which is on the road to $1 billion plus.
Right.
Last year, Top Gun Maverick, Avatar 2, whatever. You know what? Make fun of Avatar all you want all day. It got families out to see that movie. I think what you have to do is you have to grow a spine, and you have to say to the marketing person, the young woman in marketing who just got out of college, who has no real world experience, you have to say, why don't you stick around and learn before you start pushing what you think would be a good marketing strategy? And you need to learn what the real marketplace is, because I think that, if you just lean into put storytelling first, that stuff succeeds.
Yeah.
Well, I think the problem is you've got this sort of, have you heard of this term? I've never heard this term, reverse mentoring. It's where a young person is trying to tell older people in the marketplace how things should be run. And I think that first of all, there is something to that. There's definitely something to be learned by new techniques promoting on social media. But then there's the real world of what the marketplace is.
Right.
Sounds like my house.
There's also the question of knowing who your audience is. I mean,
correct.
Video gaming isn't rocket science. It's like if you have hot chicks and you got stuff blowing up and you got dudes cracking dick and fart jokes, you're going to succeed, right?
Yes, every time.
It's the single most simple thing in the world to do. But
so easy.
The G4 relaunch, they're like, we're going to hire ugly girls. We're going to desexualize everything. We're going to call our audience misogynists and every type of ist you can think of,
right,
and we're going to shame them for liking what they like. And it was like, yeah, of course that's not going to fly.
Matthew, you make a really good point. The thing is I actually really felt kind of sorry for Frost when that happened. I thought, because I remember when I was back at G4 and I worked with Morgan Webb and I worked with Olivia Munn, Allison Hayslip, those women did have stalkers. They had incidents with stalkers that found the address of G4, that went to the parking lot. There became a company policy where you had to have security escort the female talent to their cars. So are there people who harass you and are annoying online?
Chris, my record was a sponge of that. Okay. I got an innocent plea when I went to court for that. Okay. I don't know why you're bringing it up right now.
Exactly. But so I get it. But are you going to win hearts and minds by lecturing people and humiliating the audience? No. Do you know how you win hearts and minds? You have a sense of humor. And my feeling is if Olivia Munn ever felt that way, she would have turned it into a joke. And I believe that she was given very poor advice by the new people who were at G4. It should have been, she could have almost said the same thing, but make it as a joke. She could have done it in a bikini. You know what I mean? Or just done something to make you laugh.
Nobody wanted to see Frost in a bikini.
Well, exactly.
Well, Olivia Munn wrote an entire book on the topic, and she made a joke, "Suck at Wonder Woman," and it was a good book.
Oh no, that book is hilarious. They've tried to cancel her for some of the things she said in the book. Do they realize she's not being serious? It's a humor book,
right?
So
it's humor.
Rob, you had something you were going to say.
There's a breaking news.
Ooh.
There is a Star Trek Picard, the IMAX live series finale event.
Whoa!
I'm going to buy tickets right now.
You can't buy tickets until April 12th, and the tickets are free.
Oh,
so here's get ready to send off Captain Jean-Luc. It just says Jean-Luc and his crew in style.
JL.
On Wednesday, April 19th, experience the last 2 episodes of Star Trek Picard in IMAX, followed by a pre-taped Q&A with the cast of the show. Plus, enjoy exclusive perks like complimentary concessions and a season finale poster giveaway. Participating cities include Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, New York, Orlando, Phoenix, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. Get your free tickets Wednesday, April 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Time, before they're gone.
Oh, my God.
Ooh, I got to tell you, when was the last time we had a Star Trek event like this? Why has Star Trek Legacy not already been announced? Please. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So This is great news, Rob. So if you guys want to do that, make sure you check it out. We'll put the link in the description below so you can see it. And hopefully we'll get a chance to go to the event as well. So.
Wow. Okay. I am doing a calendar notification.
The 12th.
Is
at
there
midnight.
a link? Is there a link, Rob?
Yeah.
I'm going to send it over to you.
Yeah.
Can you put it in the private chat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, since we're talking G4, and I know that's great news, and we'll talk more about this going into the show a little further, but I just want to kind of deal with Chris's doc here. We have the trailer that we'd like to show everybody real quick. So let's go ahead and roll that beautiful beam footage.
I was busy setting my calendar notification. 1 second.
Here. I'm doing the same thing. Thanks, Rob.
I don't want to forget this. All right, here we go.
If I were to just start apologizing for the things that we did wrong 10 years ago, the show would never end.
G4 was really one of the very last cable channels ever launched. It was the end of this linear cable era before we got to streaming and whatever it is we watch now. Something unique, something different, something a little meta, something that was turn the mirror back onto pop culture and kind of spit in its face, but then wipe it off and give you a kiss at the same time. He was a TV host who was also a production assistant on another show.
Oh, nice molester stash.
You do know who that is, right?
Shia LaBeouf, Transformer Kid.
No, it's you.
Friend sent me a series of VHS resume tapes. There was no one better than Whitney Cummings until Olivia Munn came on set.
Hello, Governor. I am Olivia Munn.
She delivered amazingly.
We dumped a bunch of snakes on her. Wow.
Was Olivia wearing Slave Leia at Comic-Con?
History in the making.
The floodgates that they were open.
Fans just losing their minds.
We were being hounded.
It was also kind of subversive 4chan dark comedy.
We did stuff that would not fly.
Go for Power Girl. You're a whore. Also, more susceptible to getting AIDS.
And then from there, the wheels were off the bus.
You got another light bulb, right? Deal, check out. And it's on fire. The world has been waiting for a half Chinese, half American girl diving into a giant chocolate-filled cream pie.
When he jumped.
Right before we went live, Kevin had just shown me 2 girls, 1 cup.
Sex with dragons is one of God's special mysteries.
I spent 8 years researching space dragon sex.
Mannequins. Not all of those things that happened on the show
I don't swallow with Kevin.
would be acceptable by today's standards.
The infamous fat suit gag, one of our production management was going to walk.
I did a lot of on-camera drinking. Try a beer from every single.
2.7. You should be dead.
People will look at a broadcast back then and think, ooh.
Oh my.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore.
Man, we did it once, but now no more. You can't do that no more.
Can you imagine that being on now?
I missed that so much. Oh my God.
I love
can't imagine
documentaries
it being
like that.
Kids today need
Like,
this.
it reminds me a lot of Chaos on the Bridge, where
Yeah.
like we got to see like behind the scenes on The Next Generation when it first started and stuff like that. I cannot wait to watch this documentary.
Oh,
yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Chris, can I say I watched a lot of that live, my friend, and the episode where Olivia Munn jumped into the pie, I remember thinking, "Oh, this is awesome!" But then when Kevin revealed that he was also wearing the French maid costume, I went bananas. It went from like, "Oh, super hot chicks" to hilarious in like 0.5 seconds. The show, it's for me, it goes down like. It was a part of my formative adult years, like my late 20s. Like I just could not get enough of Attack of the Show. It's a bummer that the relaunch was not the same.
Well, if you guys want to see Attack of the Doc, it's having a special event premiere on Friday, April 21st at the Frida Cinema in Santa Ana, California. There are showings at 8 p.m. and 10:15 p.m. as well as a post-screening Q&A. We'll have a link to get tickets down in the description. If you can't make it to that, Attack of the Doc will be available via video on demand April 24th. And where is that available at, Chris, for VOD?
It's currently on Vimeo. I can put a link up, give you a link to it. But it's the April 24th, video on demand date is specific because that's the 21st anniversary of the launch of G4 TV. So we timed that for a reason.
That's awesome.
We just added a 5:30 p.m. or a 5:30 p.m. screening in addition on Friday, April 21st, just because a lot of people want to go. So I will be at all 3 of those screenings, and it's going to be something of a mini reunion. there's a lot of events where only people that are in the industry get to go to premieres like this. But I wanted to make sure that the premiere that we did, we had tickets on sale to the public. So there will be people from the old G4 that will be in attendance at that premiere screening. And I think we're going to be partying at the bars after as well in the area. But yeah, come down to the Frida Cinema. It's one of the only independent movie theaters in Southern California. They do independent programming. You're an indie filmmaker. You want to show your movie there, you can just approach the people at the Frida. It's great. So I hope people snag up tickets and go.
We got a super chat from Dustin Cole. Says, I would live on that channel every day.
Yes, it's so funny. Same here. I literally watched everything on that channel except for me. Like I was like, I know what I said. I don't need to see what I said. But dude, it was weird. It was like a job for years for me. I was on it for almost 8 years because I was on the very, like the first week that the new Attack of the Show premiered. I was on there all the way up until the very last show. I was there, and Kevin had left. It was weird how it's like what I kind of feel like is they just kept forgetting to fire me because I did. I would get myself in trouble. I would get myself in a little bit of trouble, and they would just sort of forget to we're going to fire that guy, and just like it never happened. So I was on till the end. So it's kind of like, I'm sort of the gateway into the story and then out of the story. I kind of bookend the film, but I mean, maybe at some point there'll be a documentary about the new G4 and kind of like, what led to its, untimely demise. But I think that there are lessons to be learned from its failure. And you put it out like, look, if they just done what the old G4 was, people want that. But I don't know. Do you need that now with so much great stuff on YouTube? I'm not sure. If we do.
I mean, they could have gone the Mr. Beast route and just do highly produced, videos that have to do with like, video games and stuff like that. Right. The thing is that they literally demonized their own audience. They literally told people to not watch their show if they didn't like the direction it was going, and everyone was like, "Okay, we're not going to watch you."
Yeah, I was a super fan. I started watching when the relaunch happened, and it was like I think it was like 2 days in. I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, this is not for me."
What differentiated the new G4 from just any good YouTube channel? And what's great about YouTube is, here's the thing, and Rob, you've said it, so I'm going to quote Robert Meyer Burnett with him on the show.
We do often.
He says Rob has mentioned, and you've mentioned this several times, that the new currency is authenticity. The old G4 had authenticity, even though there were produced segments, comedy bits, and whatnot. Like, God, there was an episode where Kevin and Olivia played the Wonder Twins. I mean, they would just ridiculous comedic segments, but authenticity. That is why YouTube is so popular. Because it's unproduced.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest faux pas that Frost did was she admitted that they don't play the games, they don't even write the reviews, they just sit there and read what other people have scripted for them, and instantly every credibility of the on-screen talent was gone.
And you might as well said Chat GPT's written everything. It was crazy that she said that, because I honestly believe that in our AI, soon to be AI drenched culture, I really do think that individuals, the great currency that we're all going to have moving forward in the 21st century, is authenticity, because it's going to get to the point where you're probably going to be able to CGI your own avatar, put it on your own YouTube channel, have Chat GPT write a script for you, and people think they're watching you live. I mean, we're going to get there, so they'll be able to tell. I mean, you can't fake the twinkle in a person's eye when they say something.
Yep.
And I think that one of the great things, Chris, the thing about Attack of the Show, I was actually on it once. You got me on it to produce or to promote the comic book I self-published, which was actually very, very cool. And I didn't write or draw it; I just published it. But that show was fun, and it reflected the audience. And what's really interesting now is that we live in this weird performative activist culture that has sort of been imposed on us. It's almost like there's this fascist government that doesn't really exist, but it'll come after you anyway if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And people are going to get tired of it. And I'd give it maybe another year or two, and it's going to snap back hard. And the people that are willing to embrace who they are, or the people that have always been, like Gary Beekler at Nerdrotic, somebody said to me, what he's doing now is protest. I've always said I like Gary because he's a San Francisco punk rocker. He's the counterculture that they had in the 60s brought into the 2020s. And that's what he's doing on YouTube. He's protest programming, and he's demanding authenticity. And I'm like, I like that, because everyone is dancing around eggshells these days and not being their true selves.
Man, I'd settle for just basic creative competency at this point.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, all the stuff coming out of Star Wars Celebration. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch it. It was cringeworthy stuff coming out of there. And I'm like, why is it so hard for Hollywood to just understand basic storytelling? Like we're not asking for like a full hero's journey or anything like that. We just want something that's basically entertaining. And they can't even give that to us.
Yeah, the reason why is because you can't, when you make a copy of a VHS tape, what happens? You get a worse copy of the original. And all of the people who are writing stories now are basically, making copies of good stuff that came from before. They don't
like that movie Multiplicity. We're at the 5th clone right now.
Or that movie, The Force Awakens, which was basically just like a rehash of Episode 4.
It's a copy of a copy of a copy, and
but a bad copy of Episode 4. Yeah. But it's interesting. There's still lots of good stuff. Like last night's episode of Succession was a banger, and the acting was terrific. Interesting story, and the fact that the creators said, no, we're ending it. Season 4, they're like, we're going to go out the way we want to go out. When we made the show the way we want to make the show. And there's still a lot of people, when a Craig Mazin, I think, gets something like The Last of Us and works with Neil Druckmann, they create something that's worthy of watching. There are creators that are making great things.
Well, HBO seems to have their thumb on the pulse,
they always have.
Is good. Yeah.
The people, and what are they trying to do? Dismantle it. Take away the HBO moniker and make it just Max.
Right.
Not understanding what they've got there.
That's so weird. That's why would you do that? HBO is synonymous with entertainment.
I think what's really interesting is that and Star Trek is like this too. Terry Matalas was somebody who came in and loved Star Trek. He worked in post-production on Deep Space Nine. He worked with Brandon Braga on Voyager. He worked on Enterprise. Then he cut his teeth writing shows like Nikita. And then he was a showrunner on 12 Monkeys, which, I mean, if you look at the scripting, the writing on 12 Monkeys, it's tight as a drum. I mean, that's a beautifully, like Succession, a 4-season series. And the problem is the people in charge that are making these decisions, they don't know what's good or bad. So all they can do is hire people that have a track record of some kind. They don't necessarily know if those are the right people for the right job. But they'll hire them. They'll be like, well, this person's done 6 things. Let's give them this. And it becomes as if it's generic, and that's how corporations choose to. I understand a corporation's like, okay, this person has an Ivy League master's degree in business. So he goes to the front, or she goes to the front, or they go to the front of the line. And then it's not necessarily, well, do you love our IP? Well, I'll find out. I'll find out about your IP. Okay, well, you've got a business degree. We'll hire you. Right. And like, how did Gary Beekler's been doing some great lately? He has an editor. He's working with Perry Chan. They've been doing some really cool standalone analysis videos that are hilarious, scathing, but also quite insightful. And people get mad when I promote Gary, but look, good work is good work.
Right.
And what's really interesting is like his stuff, that his coverage on Rings of Power, this article that came out that I covered on my show as well, about Jennifer Salke talking about Rings of Power and how it had only a 37% completion ratio. That means people that started watching the show, only 37% finished all 8 episodes. Netflix's policy is if a show doesn't have a 50% completion ratio for whatever reason, it's canceled. They had a 37% completion ratio on the most expensive show ever made.
Well, and they call it a success, and they're cheering it. Say, hey, don't call this anything but success.
Yeah, but you know what? You know what's interesting about what you just said, Rob. When it comes to Gary, when it comes to the Popcast guys, when it comes to you, when it comes to Geeks and Gamers, you know, name whoever you want. When you're a channel that levies criticism at entertainment properties, it's more than just like, oh, I didn't like this. This is stupid. This sucks. You guys point out exactly what's wrong with it, why it's wrong, and how it could be fixed. Right. And when you're that kind of like salient with your criticisms, like Gary is excellent at this. Like he just zeroes in on all the problems and why it's a problem. Like it becomes hard to ignore, and people flock to that more so than when people are just like, I didn't like it because it's racist or like whatever. You know, like it's like when you're criticizing something, you have to be mindful of like how you're criticizing it and be thoughtful about it if you want people to take you seriously. Thing I love about Shane and Brian here is that when there was good Star Trek, they acknowledged, hey, this is good Star Trek.
Yeah.
When it was bad Star Trek, they weren't afraid to call out, hey, this is bad Star Trek and here's why it's bad.
Well, I think something happened in the last week that's incredibly significant to all YouTubers that are covering media. Russell Crowe did an interview with Critical Drinker.
Yes,
that's awesome.
And the studio, a guy named Jeff Katz was one of the people responsible for the movie. They got, I mean, Critical Drinker has over 1 million subscribers. I think his story analysis is very on point.
Oh, yeah.
In the real world, he's a novelist himself. And the fact that the studio sought him out and got him a great interview. Now, it's not because Critical Drinker's a shill. They went to him. And they went after his audience because his audience are the people that they want.
Can I offer a quick thing? I'm the one that connected Jeff Katz to Critical Drinker.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
So Jeff Katz, who I've
awesome.
known for years, you probably met him at San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah, and he was at Fox for a long time.
Yeah, so he's been around. He is responsible for Snakes on a Plane. This is and by the way, we had a whole email exchange. He DM'd me on Twitter. We were talking. He was going to try to get Russell Crowe on the Film Threat livecast, but they ultimately went with Drinker, which I have no problem with. Drinker's got a bigger audience than me. Yeah. Makes sense. And then I reached out to Drinker because I'd been on a show a bunch of times and just connected Jeff with Drinker. But Jeff was, all I can say is this: there are a lot of people in Hollywood that are aware of what the problem is. There are a lot, and they don't like what's happening. And they pay attention to people who are speaking out about it. The problem is there aren't enough people who work in the industry who are saying, hey, maybe this pathway we're going down isn't working. Because I was at Midnight's Edge in the morning this morning, and I said, can anyone cite an example of an overly woke movie that was a huge financial success and a broad mainstream success? And there isn't one. No. Not one example. Not a TV show, not a, if the metrics are out there, that's what I love about box office. You can't fudge the numbers that much. It's right out there in the open. What movies succeeded? Mario. What movies failed? Strange New World. And that movie failed colossally. By the way, I saw that movie in a theater. How god awful. But anyways, well, so yeah, I just want to say, like, that's a significant thing. And Jeff was saying, like, he had to convince the studio, which was Sony, to like, this is a good idea. We should have Russell do this. And Russell just didn't do like a 4 or 5 minute junket interview. No, he was on for 30 minutes. I watched the interview. It was very good. No surprise.
Well, Drinker is a very smart guy.
Yeah.
And so is Gary Beekler. And, when he does Friday Night Tights or something, I understand a lot of people, the free-form conversation might turn people off. I get accused when I promote his videos. And I'm like, look, despite what you think of Gary, watch this video. Because the script he writes for these things and the editing that Perry Chan is doing, he's making some really great content that is worth watching.
Right.
And I think that, in a way, all of us are kind of at the vanguard of, while everyone else, while our younger audiences are going a little nutty, we're the people that are saying, look, here, let's bring you down to the real world. Let's stop the performance activism and let's have a real conversation. And I always say to people that come after me, I'm like, look, you have a problem with me. You have an open invitation. Come on my show, come on live, and let's talk about it. If you hate my guts or you think I'm wrong, or I leave that as an open invitation to anybody. And if you want to, and no one's taking me up on it. Not
Yeah,
one person.
it's funny when James Mangold came after me and the Salty Nerd podcast. We had a lot of YouTubers who basically sided with Mangold just because he was James Mangold. And I reached out to all of them. I was like, hey, have me on your show. Let's talk about it. And when I actually showed up and showed that like we weren't like, basement dwelling neckbeards like Mangold accused us of being, and we could actually have like an intelligent conversation about like what it was I actually said that got James Mangold so upset. A lot of these YouTubers actually became really good friends of ours.
Right.
So,
well, you don't get 1.5 million subscribers for The Drinker. You don't get 800,000 subscribers for Nerdrotic. If you don't know what you're talking about and you're not like striking a chord in a lot of people, and hopefully the studios start to realize, and stop focusing on, Friday Night Tights as entertainment. If you like what Rob said, if you really focus on the content specifically that like Gary's putting out, like Drinker's putting out, it's critical thought processes through all of these types of things that are happening, and it makes sense. And anybody who believes in common sense, just watch a little bit of it, and you're immediately going to go.
There aren't a lot of
this rings
people who
true.
believe in common sense anymore, though, Shane.
There are no, that's not true. There's a lot of people do. They're just not very loud, and that's a part of our problem, I think.
Well, it's interesting. I came across you guys, the Popcast channel, because I loved your produced content. I started watching your stuff, and I'm like, these guys are really the dulcet tones of your voice, Shane. But also I really, and the same was true. The same was true of Midnight's Edge. I didn't know those guys, and when I jumped into the space, especially during COVID, we all started meeting one another and streaming, and I think it's been great, and seeing different points of view and people coming together. Like, look, we all have slightly different points of view, all of us that are here on this panel now, but we can have great discussions and respect one another and talk to one another. And I think that the mainstream media is not doing it. Joe Rogan goes on and has a 3-hour conversation with somebody. No one can sit there. People keep trying to take him down, but it's like, look, he just asks questions to people.
Right.
And you get to actually, the mainstream media is dead. I mean, they don't know it yet, but they're dead because they can't do what we do. They can't put on any guest they have, or they talk for 3 or 4 minutes. How do you have any substantive conversation if that's going on? And it's all happening on YouTube, and Hollywood completely they lost the YouTube audience at their peril. They didn't pay attention. People laughed at me for going on to YouTube.
Right.
And it's a whole different world. And everyone, look at the streaming services. They're scrambling. They don't understand why they're not making money hand over fist. They don't know. They don't get it. Amazon doesn't know.
Sorry, can I make a quick point, sort of jumping off what Rob was talking about? And Rob can attest to this fact. We hung out at many a San Diego Comic-Con in the 90s. And do you remember that little area in the Marriott? We would all sit around. We would chat. You would say something. I would disagree with you, and I would yell at you passionately, and you would yell at me back, or Darren Doctorman or other friends of ours in that circle of a bunch of nerds. And the conversation was the point, and I loved that. The whole point of, to me, nerd culture is we can disagree and coexist. To me, that's the point of America. This country,
right.
Yes,
this country, we disagree and coexist.
Well, Chris,
I'd like to ask you this, Robert and Chris and Shane. Like, citizen journalism has been a thing since the dawn of journalism. It's only this recent trend of like institutional journalism. It's like, oh, these are the real journalists versus like people who are actually reporting on real news. But how important do you think access is for like people like YouTubers who like, okay, we can't go to like the press junkets and interview the celebrities of this movie, but that frees us up to give our real opinion. Whereas you have these other YouTubers who are afraid to do anything but shill because they're afraid they're going to lose their access.
Yeah. Chris, I'll let you, or Rob, go ahead.
Yeah. Like, look, I've had access forever. It never changed. It never swayed me. A free t-shirt, even an invite to a premiere. It's mainly just because I've been a smart ass and a sarcastic asshole forever. So I don't know how to not be that. But I don't care. Like, I don't get it. I'm still on Warner Brothers shit list for something I did in 1993.
But we've talked about how Paramount has targeted you guys in particular for your criticisms against Star Trek, and that has hurt, your ability to get like certain types of access, right?
Well, but actually, I have to say this: you can get access to anything in LA. If you live in LA, there is. If I want to go to a premiere, I just make a few phone calls and I can get into a premiere, no matter what. Like I remember going to the Star Trek: The Motion Picture 4K event on the Paramount lot, and because Darren Dockerman worked on it, I actually contributed to the first release of the 4K version when it was back in 2001, because I had the original TV commercials that are on that disc that Orson Welles narrated. And, I figured because of the Axanar situation, which really screwed me up with Paramount, and still to this day has, and then also my position, but I can still, I can still call somebody up and get on a list. And I don't have to, it's never been my desire to be part of they call it the Access Media, because as Chris said, I mean, we've been here. Chris founded a magazine with Mark Altman in the mid 90s called Sci-Fi Universe. I was the critic at large of that magazine. It was the magazine for sci-fi fans with a life. And we were snarky, and we turned Brandon Braga into a villain, and he loved it. He played a heel. He would come on because he was the man involved in Star Trek that people love to hate. And he was a good sport. He'd get interviewed, and he even kind of dated this girl Amanda. I mean, we were doing kind of the G4 version of sci-fi nerddom, right, Chris? In Sci-Fi Universe, yeah. That's kind of what you did.
Yeah. It was, I think the vision for it was, it's sort of punk rock like Film Threat, but we only cover sci-fi. And they were filled with all little touches in it. One of the things is the opening news section was called The Big Bang. And in the background of the logo was an explosion from a science fiction movie. Because that's my favorite sci-fi movie, is the one where something blows up at the end. That was always sort of the joke with Altman and I. So we just find what blows up? Look at the end of Logan's Run, the domed cities blow up. I mean, is there a reason for it? I don't know. Does it make sense?
I still don't forgive you for your take on Space 1999 in that magazine.
Oh, that's true.
I still hold it against you almost 30 years later.
You know what? I deserve it. Also, I think I actually got Altman banned from Paramount because when Deep Space Nine came out, I wrote something scathing about it in the editorial. And then after a while, it was just like, why don't I just focus on Film Threat? You guys do the sci-fi magazine. So
yeah,
it was fun at the time.
Yeah. But I think that the thing about Access is I don't need to build up our YouTube channels. We don't need access. We have ourselves, that authenticity, right. And people are, and that's why they hate us. They hate us because we don't need their access.
Yeah. They can't control you.
No, they can't control what we're saying. I'll tell you, the one thing that bothered me that's happened lately is I wanted to interview my favorite, this happened about a year ago, my favorite Star Trek novelist, David Mack, modern Star Trek novelist, about the Star Trek Coda trilogy that came out that ended the Star Trek Litverse. And he and I have always had a great, he's written me in as characters. He wrote a 24 tie-in book called Rogue, and he made me a character in the book. The Reeve Stevens and Shatner made me a character in one of the Shatner novels.
That's awesome.
And I said to David Mack, I said, I can't wait for this series, because I've always loved the Star Trek Litverse. And he was going to do an interview with me, and I actually said to him, I'm like, maybe you should run it up the flagpole. And I told him, John Van Sitter's, run it up the flagpole. I told him to do it. And he did it, and they said, well, he shouldn't talk to me. Oh. And I've done nothing but sing the praises of the Star Trek Litverse. I have been talking about how I've read Star Trek novels my whole life. I've never thought I love them. And it's just interesting that when you start to be critical, I mean, look, the reason I'm critical is shit is bad.
That's it.
Right.
I mean, it's demonstrably terrible.
Yeah. You're critically honest.
Yeah, and when you start looking at the actual numbers of what the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies made, there's a reason why Star Trek 4 hasn't happened, because they don't know how to make a movie that fits within a budget that is reasonable. None of those movies made money.
Right.
None of them. All three Star Trek movies, their profit margins, if any, was minuscule. Star Trek Beyond didn't make any money. And people are like, what are you talking about? People forget that when you look at the box office of a film, the studio gets half of that. So the studio, and then it's what did it cost? What did it cost to market? And something a lot of people don't understand is they also charge studio overhead against box office grosses, meaning that's why studios can always say no movies made money. So what happens is when they charge studio overhead, they basically charge the operating cost of the entire studio, the day-to-day operations against the budget. And this is, by the way, this is fair play. You can do this because it is made at Paramount, whether it was shot on the Paramount lot or not. Paramount administration, Paramount executives, Paramount accountants, all of them participated in the making of the film. So they charge that against what it costs to make the movie. Now, it's not a line item on the budget, but it is definitely for the studio overhead. And that's why so many movies don't make any money. Art Buchwald, when he sued Paramount famously for the Coming to America, if anybody wants to look into the idea of studio counting, look into the Art Buchwald Coming to America case, because that was a groundbreaking case in terms of money in Hollywood. But that's the real problem, is that a lot of these franchises, like the Star Trek, if you make a Star Trek movie that's more than $100 million, you will never make money.
Yeah,
and
you've been talking about that lately. Yeah,
and when J.J. Abrams and his ilk comes in, they want to get, and same with Secret Hideout, we're going to get as much money as we can, when we can, while we can. And what's interesting is that Brian Fuller was deposed because Star Trek, I mean, you know, he was trying to do the best job he could, but Star Trek always has a very expensive, especially for a show, upfront costs that other TV shows don't have, because you can't buy everything off the rack. You have to build it. Right, and the way you effectively produce a Star Trek show is then you amortize the costs of all that across your episodes. So, for instance, each episode you have this much money to build sets. But with Star Trek, you have to build all the sets up front. And then that money gets amortized. That's why Rick Berman was such a great producer. They were making 26 episodes of Star Trek, and he knew that, okay, we've got these upfront costs, but if I want to spend more money, I'll do Best of Both Worlds at the end of the season. So I'll do 6 bottle shows to cut down on the cost. And each one of those will be under budget by $50,000. And then I'll get $250,000 for VFX or sets I need to build, or a matte painting of a planet where the colonies have been destroyed. He was a brilliant TV producer. Maybe he wasn't a great canonista when it came to Star Trek lore, but he certainly knew how to produce a TV show. And nowadays, everyone's, how much money can I get? Right. How much money can I get? And that's one of the problems with the Star Trek films.
Yeah. Well, that's why they can't get made. You're right. So, I mean, I think you've pointed out multiple times now that Star Trek 4 is not happening for a couple of reasons, but one of them is it's just they think it's going to cost too much money to make it. So,
and it is, because nobody knows how to actually make movies anymore. They, at the studio level, they honestly don't. And when I say that, yeah, you can hire all these people that know how to make movies, but nobody is creatively challenged or budgetarily challenged because they get everything they want.
Well, and now Amazon's raising the bar on what movies, what TV shows cost. So everything's even becoming more expensive, right?
And if you read the article about Ben Affleck, there's a great article, I think it was on Puck or The Ankler today, about Air. You know how Air made, they put it out theatrically and it made $20 million over the Easter weekend, which is good, but they have a $120 million price tag on that movie.
Oh my God.
And everyone's touting it as a big win, but was it?
Obviously
that
not.
was
120 million.
But that was Amazon. Basically, you know, Amazon is going to have it as an exclusive for its streaming service. So they're looking at theatrical as just the cherry on top, right? So like, you know, if they had just released it to streaming, it would have been just part and parcel of what their streaming.
Yeah, but now they're making money, which they should do.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, we got a super chat from 6 Scale Mafia. He's obviously one of your friends, Rob. Hey, all, first time here, friend of Rob's. Also a huge fan of Chris. Can't stand ROP, Mando 3, or basically anything lately other than Picard season 3. And on that note, from No
6
Money
Scale
G,
Mafia hooked me up with
look at that.
Oh my God.
Just saying.
That's hot.
It is. And this is a great looking figure, by the way.
That looks great. Yeah. From No Money G, congrats for Chris for his new job as head showrunner of Disney Sparkle.
Oh my God. See, I actually think that that's a legit idea. I mean, I did jokingly discuss this, that, you know, just create a gay brand and just do full on authentically gay stories and see how successful it is. and separate it out. This is not a new or original idea at all. They separate out music brands, right? Like you find this audience, and for whoever wants to consume that kind of content, make it available. So yeah, Disney Sparkle's a joke, but I talked to a friend of mine who actually produced a movie that I know you all know about, who pitched Disney and said that he thought the Disney Sparkle thing was a very good idea. So,
yeah, but the thing about that, Chris, is like every executive in Hollywood knows that there's not a big enough audience to support that type of thing. So they need to shoehorn it into things that do have an audience in order to make it seem like people actually want this type of content, right?
Yeah, Chris has a good point though. Like they for a long time they had male-centric channels, female-centric channels, Lifetime, etc. Right? I mean, why not? I think Matt just said it, because they know it's not going to be successful, so it's easier to shoehorn it into other things that are by default successful.
Or what you do is you take two brands that are mainly targeting a male audience and feminize the shit out of them, and then you end up with Marvel and Star Wars.
You mean like Bud Light?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just like Bud Light, a blue collar working man's beer. That is, look, I mean, it is, that whole situation is a whole other conversation, but it is true that like, alcohol sales in general are down with younger people. They're drinking less. I think they're basically smoking and consuming weed, and that's replaced it. It's not like they're not altering their minds. It's just they're using something else. But look, what a colossally bad decision. But the problem is it's decisions being made by people who don't have a lot of real world experience. I think these are people new to marketing, maybe more fresh out of college, and the lazy executives that are in charge and have real power are allowing them to make these decisions, which is awful, which is now you see the fall of Star Wars. I mean, my God, that last episode of The Mandalorian last week might have been one of the worst nearly hours of television I've ever seen.
So bad.
Yeah,
it's so bad. I'm embarrassed to be a Star Wars fan. I was talking to a friend. I miss loving Star Wars. I don't like, even when the prequels were coming out, I had a lot of problems with the prequels, but man, it was so fun to go opening night to see one of those Star Wars movies, because you knew you were friends with everyone in line because they were all there because they're all super fans.
Yeah, Chris, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. He's like, "Oh man, I wish they made movies like they did when they made the episode 1, 2, and 3." I'm like, is it gotten so bad that everyone's forgotten how bad those movies
are? Yeah.
Like, it's gotten so bad that those movies are now being pushed into the realm of good movies. Like, I mean, my buddy,
better. I'll say this: they've aged better. I predict that the sequels will not age as well.
Right.
And, we were talking about earlier about just the divide in fandom and whatnot, and just how idiots don't know how to disagree with each other and then just coexist. And which is such a stupid thing. First of all, I despised The Force Awakens. I hated that movie. The way
I did too.
I hated that film. I couldn't believe people liked it. I remember coming out going like, "You like that?" The way that they killed Han Solo, it wasn't in some heroic act of self-sacrifice. It was jabbed in the heart with a lightsaber from his son. It was the stupidest thing ever. I hated it. Then when The Last Jedi came out, I was like, oh, maybe the story is going somewhere. I'm not going to say I loved it, but I will say I was like, oh, I know where this is going now. I know where this is going. Where this is going is this is the fall. And when they announced the title Rise of Skywalker, I thought he's gonna come from the other side with an army of ghost Jedi, and he's going to rise like in some Christ-like analogy. And it's gonna be, look, you got to beat up your hero, right? I was like, I'm okay with Luke being this person as long as he has a redemption and actually see him as the heroic Luke we've always wanted to see. They're just saving that for the last movie. They don't want to blow their wad in the second film, and they just did not stick the landing. But what was weird to me is I know Gary Beekler, Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, a bunch of that group I was watching, young Ripa, they hated Last Jedi. And I'm like, well, I hated Force Awakens. Last Jedi at least shows it's going somewhere. So I put together this panel at San Diego Comic-Con in 2018. Rob, you might have remembered this. John Schnepp was supposed to be on that panel. And he passed away a few days, like just as we were walking, it was officially announced that he had passed away. He was supposed to be on the panel.
Wow.
So I had all these people who hated The Last Jedi and I have people who loved The Last Jedi. And we all got together and we did. It's actually on the Film Threat YouTube channel. I recorded the audio from it. And I wanted people to talk because I didn't understand. Like, I didn't care that Gary Buechler didn't like The Last Jedi. He has some opinions I agree with and some I don't agree with. And people I disagree with, you know what? I don't care because I'm a fucking adult. I can appreciate burns. You know what I'm saying? I'm an adult and I feel like these children in adult-sized bodies have not learned how to disagree in a respectful way, much less having any respect for legacy.
Chris, let me ask you this.
Please.
Chris, and Robert, you can chime in on this too. How much of these people do you think are actual fans as opposed to activists pretending to be fans in order to further the messaging that they support as opposed to the franchise they support? Because to me, it seems like the divide here is coming from people who support the propaganda that's being injected into these beloved franchises, and they're calling themselves fans, even though they're just, like political, sycophants, as opposed to like actual fans who care about the material and disagree with the direction it's going.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that a lot of them are, look, I think it's a good thing that Marvel helped mainstream comic book superhero movies. It's the most successful brand franchise ever, surpassing
in history.
Star Wars. That 10 years of the first three phases, look, there were some highs and lows, but it was mostly highs. And when they did Guardians of the Galaxy, that's when I thought, oh my God, they're on, like, they can take, like, I knew Guardians of the Galaxy because I bought the comics when they first came out. But this was a different GOTG team, and I couldn't believe it. But like the fact that it became mainstream, that just regular people liked Marvel movies, because I saw something interesting. I saw Kevin Feige at a tribute for Richard Donner, which was, everyone got up and started a great conversation. It was great. John Savage
he worked for Richard Donner when Jeff Johns was there. They were
That's
like
exactly
interns.
right. They told some funny stories, but the one thing that was interesting, Kevin Feige made a remark I'd never heard him say in any other interview. He said that, that he was trying to explain what the Marvel formula was. Everyone always asks Kevin, what's the formula for a Marvel movie? And he's like, we don't make superhero movies. We make the movies we're trying to make are like old Hollywood movies. If you look back at old Hollywood movies from the 30s and 40s, those movies they contained adventure, romance, action, comedy, music. They were genre defying in the sense that they weren't a genre specifically. They were a big Hollywood movie made for everyone. And he said that Kevin, at least at the time, said that's the kinds of movies he aspired to make via Marvel, because they contained all those elements. Although the one thing I do find interesting is the sad lack of romance in these films now. They have not only desexualized the women, they haven't done that to the men yet. They've desexualized all the women in these modern studio movies from certain companies, but also they've just absent is any sense of romance, real romance. I mean, even Ant-Man and the Wasp, sure, he's involved with what's her name, but the Wasp chick,
you can't even tell though.
Yeah,
like you can't even tell the whole movie.
There's no chemistry between them. There's no like, he's afraid for her, the woman he loves, and vice versa. Like, where's the romance? That was one of my first thoughts, Rob. When I saw Force Awakens, I thought to myself, the original Star Wars adventure happened because Luke Skywalker was attracted to a girl who he thought was, who is she? She's beautiful. She was a hologram. He was so captured by her beauty. He wanted to save her and put his own life in jeopardy. Right. And it was romantic and sweeping. Nothing today is romantic. And the thing about Force Awakens, like, where's the romance? Where's the romance? Were they cowardly? Like, we can't really have an interracial romance in this, because there was the whole, where basically Rey friend zones Finn at the end of the movie, which I thought was stupid. I mean, I hated The Force Awakens.
Well, and then people were so desperate for romance in that they shipped Kylo Ren and Rey. Right.
Well, and also you got, Rose Tico ended up with Finn.
Yeah.
Well, there are a lot of people who wanted Poe and Finn to be together.
Oh God, the people who wanted that are freaks. It wasn't, Star Wars was never even about like the romance in Star Wars was always fairy tale level.
Mhm.
They kiss. That's it. And probably one of the most romantic lines ever spoken, I know. So,
it's fantastic.
yeah. And the lack of romance in modern Star Wars is, there's a lack of a lot of things like intelligent thought. I don't know what the deal is with that story group. There are no Mario Puzos on that story group.
I bought that Jack Black loved Lizzo. They
Yeah,
seem to make some googly eyes at each other.
What a dumb! It's like an alien trying to describe what sex is who's never experienced it or seen it or doesn't even know what it is. It's some of the writing in these modern shows. I would also all the Disney Plus Marvel shows. There's not a one that I think is any good or worthwhile. They're written by people who don't seem to have had any life experience at all, aside from Twitter. We know that the writers of She-Hulk are big on. They spend a lot of time on social media because they made it part of the show.
Dude, the funniest thing about She-Hulk was when the showrunner came out and said, like, we don't know how to write legal dramas. So I was like, your entire pitch is that she's a lawyer and you didn't hire any writers who know how to write like no David E. Kelly rejects that you could have hired to like come in and like write some legal drama.
Let me ask you guys a question real quick. Just because this is, I think, a big thing with all the studios. Why is it that it seems like they want to pander to every audience type? If you notice, the reason why I think movies and TV shows for that matter seem so generic is I feel like they're trying to pander to every group to try to pull as many people in to watch it. And I think what ends up happening is you end up losing your audiences as opposed to gaining that big broad audience. Why do you guys think that they do that? It's not successful.
Well, I think what's happened at the studio level is they're making movies that are way too expensive. They're making $150 million movies hoping they're going to gross $1 billion. The other day, I have a pretty large collection of films. I was watching Altered States. When Altered States came out, it's based on a novel, Paddy Chayefsky. It was made by Ken Russell, who's a enfant terrible director. It starred William Hurt, Blair Brown. It's a really sophisticated, despite the fact that Paddy Chayefsky didn't like the final movie, it's a very sophisticated adult science fiction film. It was shot by Jordan Cronenweth, who shot Blade Runner. And when it came out, it was my birthday movie. I was so excited to see it. And I was like 13. It was a movie about adults, about college professors delving into crazy experiments. And it was a big studio movie, and it was a big release. And it had big, cool special effects, and Starlog magazine covered it. It did not cost $100 million. And I was over the moon to see it. If I were to show that movie today to most fans and say, when I was 13 years old or 14 years old, I think it was 80, 81, when this came out, I was as excited to see this movie as I was to see a new Star Wars movie or a new Marvel movie. Nowadays, I think a lot of audiences would be bored by it because it's about real adults having real relationships and having real philosophical conversations about looking for the first truths and all this stuff. And the movies that I was growing up with, and I watched everything, I don't think half the people now, because our educational systems are not giving us a broad base of knowledge the way they used to. I mean, we don't even take civics anymore.
Right.
Nobody understands our own governmental system. And when I was growing up, I went to public school. It was a very well-funded public school, but we had a broad base of knowledge. And it was understood that our teenage years were weird and geeky and we were insecure and all that. But now social media has given everybody who's insecure a place to go form insecure tribes of people.
Yes. Well said.
And that's what's happened. You've seen massive, what used to be awkward teenage years. They've all created their own tribes and joined in and become activists for their own awkward teen years that they now are carrying into adulthood, because if you have a group of people, there's why get more mature? Why overcome your geekiness when you can stay with this activist crowd that will always pat you on the back and go, hey man, stay maladjusted your whole life. It's fine. We'll be here for you.
Yeah. Nobody ever has to grow up when that happens.
Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I'd also argue, to Robert's point, is that the people in charge of entertainment nowadays simply don't understand who their customer is. like there's this thing called demo sniping, and I think Kathleen Kennedy is probably the most guilty of this, which is where they have an established fan base of like white males, for instance, right? And they can just take those people for granted because it's like they're a big fan base. They're going to like whatever we put out with the brand on it. But if we can bring in more women, if we can bring in more people of color, then we can expand the audience demographic and make the franchise more profitable and more valuable. And so they do this by feminizing it, putting more women into it, putting more people of color into it, and hoping to attract those people who just historically haven't liked, you know, the genre or the franchise or whatever. And they're hoping to broaden the audience demographic and therefore make more money instead of catering to the demographic they know for a fact, you know, wants this stuff, and therefore alienating at least half of that audience. So in trying to expand the audience demographic, they're actually shrinking it because they're alienating so many of the hardcore fan base to begin with. And this is a systematic problem through Hollywood. At least I think it has been since I've been involved in the industry, which is basically, hey, you know, the people at the top, the shot callers, don't know who their audience is. They don't know.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. So, and maybe Chris can jump in here in a second, because that's what Matt, I think you laid it out perfectly, because, you know, what is the point of, and if you go back to when New Trek first came out, right? You got Star Trek coming back. Jason Isaacs said something really important right out the gate. He completely, you know, there were some fans pushing back on things that were said. And he's like, look, you know what? You can say all you want, but you're going to watch it anyways. I don't care if you don't watch it. And he was telling these fans. Now, Jason Isaacs wasn't a Star Trek guy. He wasn't. So he had to hear that shit from somebody else. Somebody told him that they'll watch no matter what. Right. And so is there this attitude, just what Matt was just saying, and maybe Chris, you can jump in. Is there an attitude that, well, we don't really care what our legacy fans care about because they're going to show up anyway. So screw those guys. I mean, what do you think, Chris?
It's unfortunate that that's the attitude, and I feel like that attitude comes from the people, the people that are the shepherds of these franchises. It's the executives. I mean, look, I have had the opportunity to work in the corporate space. I've worked for. I mean, G4 was very not corporate at the beginning, but then it was acquired by Universal, Comcast, all that, right? So. I don't know. It's you definitely see, even in certain corporate spaces, if you have executives that are very not corporate. When I was at G4, there was an executive named John Reiber. He was very not corporate, and he had a rep of developing material that was, you know, that was not traditional. He actually did the pilot for the Howard Stern show for E, and he worked on the Howard Stern show at E for a long time. He came from E and he came to G4 and developed shows, and, you know, just sort of was the one sort of always encouraging, go off the rails. You know, if you do it perfect, fine. If you make a mistake, even better, because the mistake will be live and you'll have fun with it. That was his attitude. Also, by the way, breaking news, Brie Larson is trending on Twitter. The first trailer for the Marvels drops tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw Gary salivating at the news. He's like, I can't wait for this.
Every time Marvel or Lucasfilm announces something, you see Az celebrating, where he's like, more content, more money, more, you know, heel versus babyface. Man, I love that guy.
Oh, he's the best. I mean, you know, he and I did we did a whole series reviewing The Prisoner. You know, we were streaming. I stopped streaming with him when I was going full time on the John Campy show, but I can't wait to get back to stream more with Az, because I love what we did. I thought it was great.
He's great. Yeah.
We got Super Chat from Jeffrey Jackson. Good writing trumps budget. Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan and season 3 of Picard are great examples of this.
Well, you know what? I was going to follow up to what Chris was saying. In the YouTube space, I know, because we can see, as you guys know, real-time analytics for who's watching our channels. And I mean, it's over 90%. My audience is over 90% males.
Ours too. Yep.
And the thing is, the core audience, what I find really strange, and I've watched this happen. I mean, now I get more and more people calling me old man grandpa. They send me the Simpsons meme shouting at clouds and all that. I never used to get that. You know, I never used to get that before. And my opinions haven't changed. Right. You know, I've been the same person I've always been. And I've always loved Star Trek. I was a paid Star Trek consultant for Viacom in the mid 90s. I worked on the Star Trek Experience for 2 years, not at the Star Trek Experience, but when it was getting made for the people that were making it. And then working on, so I have some bona fides, and it's very funny that what's happened is there has become I think a culture of disrespect. Like, it's easy to disrespect other people, dehumanize other people on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is actual credibility, or actual people that have done the work, institutional knowledge of whatever. The people that have actually done the work, put in the time, that's no longer respected, because everybody thinks that they can put in the time. Everybody thinks, well, I know, so I should be able to do this, whatever this thing is. And that isn't true. The studios are getting rid of, at least like in the home video departments and things, all of the people that had worked there for the last 40 years. They're too expensive. They want everyone to retire so they can save money. And what ends up happening is they lose the people that actually know, like, where the film elements are, or that even know what film elements are in the first place. So we're losing our institutional knowledge. Institutional knowledge is not respected by anyone else. Everyone thinks their opinion's valid, no matter what. If you're having a conversation with somebody, everyone's now the same. Nobody ever gives credibility to anybody else.
Right.
And I don't care about the amazing disrespect I get shown a lot of the time. I let it fall off or run off my back, whatever. It doesn't bother me. But what's amazing is to see how that has increased. I mean, the hatred, the division that's being fomented, and there's a fundamental lack of respect for other people that is now part of our culture. And the funny thing is that even though I can be critical of somebody, if I was in front of J.J. Abrams, if he was standing in front of me, I would be very critical, but I wouldn't say, screw you, dude. I'd say, look, I really like Regarding Henry, or I really thought The Lost Pilot was one of the great TV pilots ever.
Right. You'd find the positive. Basically.
Yeah, but I would have a conversation, and I wouldn't shy away from having an intelligent conversation with somebody whose work I didn't like. I was on a show. There used to be a show on the Sci-Fi Channel called SF Vortex that was hosted by Roger Lodge. And I will say this, I still feel guilty about this today. There was a visual effects artist named Mark DePay who directed Spawn. And we were on, Eric Wallace and I were on with him.
And from the ranch.
Yeah, and Banned from the Ranch. And Mark DePay worked, if you watch the ILM documentary, he's in that documentary. We roasted him because I hated Spawn, and roasted him live on TV. And wasn't that we were mean, but I didn't hold back. And this is 25 years ago. I still feel bad that I roasted him this bad, because he got a movie made.
To be fair, Rob, it'd be very difficult to make a Spawn movie true to the comics. I tried to explain to Shane what Spawn was, and I ran out of words. It's very complicated to make that into a good Hollywood movie,
Yeah, we actually reviewed that movie on the Salty Nerd podcast, and we went deep into it. Like, it was such a bad movie, but this was before the comic book movie,
Yeah, it's bad on a whole new level, whole different level. Yeah. But I still feel bad that I mean, Mark DePay, clearly, he wasn't perhaps a film director, or he shouldn't have been directing that movie. But I still feel bad because he did get the movie made, and it was before I had actually made a movie. I mean, I worked in Hollywood on movies, but I hadn't made a movie, and we went hard against him, man. And Mark DePay, if you're out there and you remember coming on SF Vortex with Roger Lodge hosting, I apologize for being such a dick.
He's in his basement right now, and he's sharpening a sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just,
Rob, a couple quick things.
It was disrespectful. I was disrespectful.
He's like, yeah, I know.
You're a big man, Rob. Thank you.
Disrespect comes from youth. You haven't accomplished anything at a young age, and
right.
You maybe have some disdain for those that have actually achieved things. I've noticed it. I've noticed it a lot of parts of my career, because I was just very serious minded even as a teenager, and then moved out to the West Coast, and I sold my mag. This is actually a whole other documentary about Film Threat magazine in the 90s called Film Threat Sucks.
I want to see that.
I was always told it sucks.
Right.
We're hoping to submit it to film festivals in September. We'll see.
That'd be a great story.
Well, let me ask you guys, speaking of disrespect, like, when did it become the norm for the studios to attack the fan base for not liking their feedback?
Well, that's a terrible strategy. I think that fan baiting
really
is awful.
And it's fairly new, I think.
Yeah,
it started in 2016.
It's almost like they do that so they can get free publicity for their stuff.
Because it works. It results in all these news stories. Right. Before I forget, Rob, I want to remind you of something. You made a video. It was a late 90s. You made a video that moved me so much. It's like 5 minutes, to the score of Nixon by John Williams, Star Trek Eternal.
Yeah.
To this day, it's in my watch later on YouTube, and I will rewatch it. It is a video that Rob produced, 5 minutes, about the history of Star Trek. It includes all eras of Star Trek up to that period. This incredible score by John Williams, and has the ending of it, I get chills just thinking about it, because it's every key moment from Star Trek history cut so elegantly, so incredible. Rob, please make a 4K version of it.
Well,
where's the Kickstarter for that?
I have to. Okay, so here's how that. So this video, this is a really interesting story. So I had one day in an edit bay, an extra day, and because I was a freelance editor, I was cutting low budget features, and I cut Showtime shows. I edited a lot of different things, and I usually worked out of a place called Midtown Edit, that was across from the Beverly Center, where the Starbucks and the old theaters were, where the soup plantation was. And so I had a day on this Avid, and I wanted to cut. There was this piece of music from the Nixon soundtrack called "The '60s, the Tumultuous Decade," I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I don't know why, when I heard this piece of music, it just made me think about Star Trek, because it took you on a journey. And I'm like, I would love to cut. So on that day, Mark Altman, who lived close to the Beverly Center, we got all of our laser discs and VHS tapes and whatever we had available. And because I know Star Trek so well, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this shot from this episode, and we had the movies and whatever. So at the time, you had to put the tapes in and digitize everything. That's what took the most time. So what I did was, I knew what shots I wanted to use, and I just laid them out on a timeline. So I just had it like hundreds of shots, and then I just was, mixing and matching and putting things where I wanted to put them. So it was only a day, and I did it because we were giving out the sci-fi. It was the second Sci-Fi Universe Awards. It was actually in 96 red carpet event. I want to say it was in August of 96. And we were giving Majel Barrett an award. And so this was to be played at the event, at the award show. And that summer, I kept getting people asking me, and remember, it's in standard def, VHS, Laserdiscs, and people kept asking me for it. And I'm like, I can't. So I went and bought a bunch of 5-minute VHS tapes, and I put my name and number, my address on like the front of it. I made a card on the video, and I must have sent out, I charged people like $10, and I must have made $1,000 that summer just sending people this tape. And one day I get a phone call from Landmark Entertainment, and they're like, "Are you Rob Burnett? Are you the guy that made this tape, Star Trek Eternal?" And I was like, "Yes." And they're like, "We'd like to take a meeting with you. Can you come meet with us?" And I'm like, "Okay." And they had made like the T2 3D attraction at Universal. So I go into this meeting, and there's like a whole wall of 3/4-inch tapes of Star Trek episodes. And they're like, "So how well do you know Star Trek?" This was what they were asking me. I'm like, I know Star Trek. And the guy goes, well, let's say I wanted to see a scene where like a Romulan stabs a Klingon. And I go, well, I don't know if that scene's exactly in it, but I would look at a 6th-season Next Generation episode called Birthright Part 2. Yeah, that's what I said. And he looks at me and he's like, are you kidding? I said, no. I said, there's this Klingon colony, and there's Romulans and Klingons. Like, Romulans have been holding these Klingons for a long time, and Worf shows up, and he just looks at me and he goes, "You're hired." I didn't even know what I was doing. And and they told me that, okay, we're building this thing called an $80 million attraction in Las Vegas. It's called the Star Trek Experience, and we need somebody to edit all of these videos that you'll see when you go through the attraction. And I'm like, how much are you going to pay me? And they were paying me a lot of money. And I'm like, this is my job. And I said to the guy, I go, before I can edit anything, I have to import all this stuff in. I was using an Avid. You have to import it all into the computer. And at the time, I think there was the first season of Voyager had aired, and First Contact hadn't even come out yet when I was starting. So all I did for 4 months, I went into work every day and watched 10 episodes of Star Trek because you had to digitize them in real time. And they paid me a shit ton of money every week for 4 months. And then I edited all of these things. And while we were making this, I got to do things like, there's a Deep Space Nine episode called Soldiers of the Empire. And it takes place on a bird of prey. And LeVar Burton was directing. And these Klingons sing this song in that episode. And I was on set watching LeVar Burton direct this episode, because that's where we shot Vaughn Armstrong, who played the Klingon in the Star Trek Experience. That's where they shot his view screen stuff. So Dave DeVos, who I was working with, he was directing it. So that video, and then after I was working on the Star Trek Experience, I get a call from Paramount. Paramount itself. And they're like, this is 96. So are you the guy that made this Star Trek Eternal video? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, we want to buy it from you. And I said, you want to buy it from me? It's your copyright.
Like, you already own it.
Yeah. Right. And they're like, well, we're promoting the 30th anniversary of Star Trek. It's 1996. and we want you to do various cut downs of it. And can you do like a Wesley Crusher version of it? And so I'm like, okay. So they literally paid me for this video I made. By the way, the videos, I appreciate what you said, Chris. It's just, I did it in one day. If you look at it now, it's a little primitive compared to what they're showing at creation conventions. People got very good at cutting Star Trek videos. I only had a day to do it, and it was only for this thing. And you can see it. It's called Star Trek Eternal. It's on my old YouTube channel, but the quality is terrible.
Yeah, show a clip real quick, Brian. We got that for you, Rob. It's good.
Let me find it.
So suddenly Paramount hired me, and that's how I got a job. They hired me, and then I became a Star Trek consultant for Viacom. I was a paid Star Trek consultant. They used to let me go into this room that had all the Playmates Star Trek toys, some that hadn't come out yet. That's how I was able to get the red uniform Data, which I gave to my friend Steve Melching, who's an animation writer. This Star Trek Eternal was the thing that got me the most work. I never got a job because of Free Enterprise, but Star Trek Eternal got me jobs.
So I will post the link, but if we play this, the screen will get demonetized.
Oh, will it?
Oh, will it? From the music, the Nixon music?
It's already on YouTube.
Yeah, it is on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Well,
but it's really poor quality. It's standard definition.
It's in 480. It's in 480. But like, Rob, I made so many copies of that and sent it to people just because I would send, videos.
Not even 480, bro. It's 144p.
Yeah. They didn't have 480 on YouTube at the time.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
All right. It's not
great.
Not great, but I'll tell you, it is. I get chills every time I watch it. Every single time I get chills.
It's so funny because so much more Star Trek exists then. I mean, Voyager had only had a single season. Deep Space Nine hadn't started the Dominion War. There were multiple Star Trek movies. Like, I had to add, there's no First Contact in it because it hadn't come out yet, or it hadn't come out on video yet. There's no Enterprise. People have asked me to do another one.
Yeah, it's time to update it.
Yeah.
Well, just
time to update it, bro.
Just remake this one in HD.
But then it would get demonetized.
It would get demonetized.
And Paramount would immediately slap a copyright strike on it.
Oh my God.
Although I do know some ways around that. We'll have to talk later. Hey, we do have a super chat from El Presidente Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho. Everyone wants to get paid, but not do the work, Rob.
100%. Yes, that is so true. Especially these young people who haven't done anything yet.
Yeah. Speaking of super chats and Hollywood from Stubble McShave, great name. Hollywood needs to create new IPs. They have run out of the existing one. They've run the existing ones in the ground. The only movies I'm looking forward to are Dune 2, and I don't even know what movie that is.
Robert Eggers.
Nosferatu. Robert Eggers, who made The Witch and The Northman and The Lighthouse.
Oh, I see.
I mean, even if they came out with new content, though, I mean, there's this huge, it doesn't mean that it's going to be good. I mean, that's part of the issue still. Just because they've run the old ones into the ground doesn't mean they won't run new ones into the ground. I mean, we really need good creatives, and I know we talk a lot about Picard season 3, and I know we want to talk about it, but there's a reason why Picard season 3 isn't getting beat up anywhere. If you notice, look around, nobody's really saying anything bad. Even when Andor came out, Star Wars Andor, which is arguably better than any, most of the other Star Wars that's been out. When that came out, most people said, well, it's boring. There's nothing bad about Star Trek Picard season 3. And that's because we have creatives that really care about the product and the IP. And I think that's really what's hurting, is having the knowledge base to be able to do it properly. And also the love and the care of the products that you're creating. Wouldn't you guys say?
Well, according to Michael, our super chatter here, is Picard season 3 partially good because Mr. Terry never worked at the CW? I'm sorry. Thank you, Michael. I'll let you guys respond.
First couple seasons of The Flash were all right, but go ahead, Rob.
Well, I think what's really interesting, look, I'm a total canonista nitpicking. I love nitpicking nerd, Major Grin. I'm a huge fan, and I'm a total canonista. And a lot of people are coming after me, well, Rob, what about this? What about everyone's nitpicking things from Star Trek Picard season 3, and I think they're not seeing the forest through the trees. Right. The fact is, I welled up in multiple and I will well up again. There's something coming in the next 2 episodes where I welled up again, and I literal tears because of the characters. I mean, you could tell this whole story you could do it like Lars von Trier style, like Dogville, where there's no sets, or some weird, and you could just watch these characters do the same script on a stage. And if I was watching them and the same story was told, the same dialogue was told, and they were just on an empty stage with spotlights on them, I would cry, because it's characters and story, and it's the idea that the thing about Star Trek I've tried to explain to people is that Star Trek grew up with me. I started watching it when I was 5, the original series. Then there was the animated series. And then there was the thing about Star Trek, the motion picture, that people forget. And the same reason they also forget about what the Menagerie parts 1 and 2, using the unaired, the rejected first pilot for Star Trek, but incorporating it into canon. They created a Star Trek canon where this is what the Enterprise looked like 11 years ago.
Right. And plus it was to save money, right?
Yeah, to save money, but there's Captain Pike, and that was mind-blowing when I was a kid. Oh my God, the Enterprise had another captain.
Yeah.
And then you met Robert April in the last episode of the original animated series, the Counterclock Incident, and he was the commander before Pike.
Right.
And then Star Trek the motion picture, suddenly you're 5 years later or whenever, you see the characters aged, moving into middle age, and then Star Trek 2, and then you get to Star Trek 6, the Next Generation, 87. So as I've moved through my life all the way up to 2009, Star Trek evolved and changed and grew with me. And then in 2009, some idiot had let's go back to do Star Trek with Kirk and Spock, at the Academy. While I understand the impulse in doing that, the thing about Star Trek as a franchise, as an IP, it was always giving you new information, expanding the universe. And some people could say, well, we want to go back and see Kirk and Spock at the Academy. It's like, no, because we already know everything we need to know about Kirk and Spock. Showing them their first meeting at the Academy is not going to give you more insight than what Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner gave us from 1966 to 1991. And in Shatner's case, dying canonically in 1994. How many pop culture icons or characters do you get to watch span 30 years of time and then end? None. And Star Trek, instead of, I understand what J.J. Abrams wanted to do, but you look at that, that's not Kirk and that's not Spock. Those are people pretending they're Kirk and Spock.
Right.
And look, Carl Urban, people, he was so great as McCoy. He was great at recreating Dr. McCoy. But he wasn't Dr. McCoy.
That's true.
True.
And so you're watching this, and it's like when I watched Star Trek Into Darkness, and you're asking me to believe that Benedict Cumberbatch is a genetically engineered Sikh from East India.
You're right.
Who once controlled a quarter of the world's population. Like, you don't even know when he says he's Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness. Even the characters are like, who? Because they don't even know.
Like, they don't recognize him.
Like, if anybody, here's the thing: if as a Star Trek fan, if I was still being a paid consultant, and someone came to me and said, "Here's the script for Star Trek Into Darkness," I would have said, "Well, this script is absolutely terrible." But if you want to open a script and like this about Khan, you want to retell the story of Khan, the movie should begin. It should open with the subtitle 1996. And you're at a space facility in Jaipur, India, wherever, and you see the Botany Bay on top of a rocket, launch thing.
Yeah,
that would have been bitching.
You've got these 96 genetically engineered Supermen. They're getting to the launch pad while you've got armor explosions going off. Yeah. The Allied forces are closing in. And you get to see something we haven't seen before.
That's why Star Trek needs a consultant.
Well, exactly right. And then
that would have added so much to his character too. It would have made him a badass.
I mean, and you see Khan getting his people in, like he's the last one there. He's got some kind of bazooka, and he's the one firing the weapons at the oncoming artillery, or maybe he's bringing down airstrikes or satellite lasers, and the explosions are going, and he's the last guy on the ship, and the ship barely takes off.
Yeah,
right. You see the fire's licking the spaceship on its way out.
The thing blasts off, and then you see the last stage, and then you see the Botany Bay in all of its glory rushing into space.
Yeah.
And then you hear the music, bum bum bum.
Oh yeah,
and then you cut to the credits roll, and then it cuts to 300 years later, and you see the same Botany Bay, meteor pitted, tumbling end over end in deep space, and you see a different starship, not the Enterprise,
right,
but fucking Peter Weller or whatever, and they find the Botany Bay. I mean, how do you not do that? Like it's because, and then you hire an East Indian actor, and it's so funny. They had Nicholas Meyer's 3 scripts.
Yeah.
The SETI Alpha 5, and they don't, and to me, I'm like, how do you guys not? It's such an obvious thing. I mean, how many comics have dealt with this? Greg Cox's Khan trilogy that deals with eugenics wars. It's already been in Star Trek canon, and now they're ripping off all these Star Trek novels without accreditation.
Yep,
it's so strange to me that there's all this obvious stuff that would have made, because Star Trek Into Darkness, to me, I'm looking at this movie, why did you put people in torpedoes? Like, it's so weird. The choices they made are so bizarre. I watched the movie and I don't understand it. You have a super secret spaceship that's being constructed in a base at the orbit of Jupiter, and at the same time you have a model of that same super secret spaceship on your desk at Starfleet Command. No one's ever walked in and said, this giant dreadnought, this black, vaguely Constitution class ship that you have here on your desk, what is that?
Foreshadowing, Robert. Okay, high-level screenwriting.
We got a super chat from Dustin Cole. I'm adding the super chat because I think it puts a button on your point. Studios have forgotten how to produce dramas about the human condition.
How do you forget? I mean, that's constant. That's what we do on a daily basis. Go ahead, Chris. Good point.
No, that's so accurate, because what's weird is we can't even agree 2 + 2 = 4.
Oh, it's so true.
Actual mathematicians say that in some cases 2 + 2 = 5. Stupidity.
What cases?
Celebrated. No, these are real conversations. Academia is failing this next generation of kids, filling their heads with
so hard
ideas that will not help them going forward in life. And
I agree.
Just seeing institutions like you were talking earlier, Rob, about institutional knowledge not being passed along. I mean, I have genuine fears about our future because attitudes are being promoted and celebrated that are destructive to our society. And I never thought I would see it. I never thought I would live to see the dystopian worlds that we were warned about in 80s sci-fi movies now come to life as reality, where people are being convinced, no matter how times you repeat a lie 100 times, does it become true? It never becomes true. And we're seeing it in so many places. You know what? Pick your example. There are a lot of places. It's just utterly ridiculous. I mean, and these conversations are being censored. You talk about certain types of topic areas, and you go into some sort of depth. Your channel will get hit with hate speech. It happened to Chrissy Meyer. You know, she's a comedian. You know,
There's certain topics you literally just cannot talk about. You can't talk about. You can't do anything about with them, or else it's a hit on your channel.
It's unbelievable that we're to this point and look, you know, the history of Film Threat, guys probably don't know a lot about it, but look, I worked for Larry Flynt. I sold him my magazine in the early 90s and worked for him. Here's a guy who sacrificed everything for free speech. Right. And he fought up all the way through to the U.S. Supreme Court, a court case involving Jerry Falwell, who he had parodied in a fake ad in his magazine Hustler.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And look, I worked directly with Alan Isaacman, who was the attorney who fought in front of the Supreme Court. Today, we are able to make fun of politicians and celebrities. We're able to do parodies because of that case, because of that court case.
So what movie is that?
That's the People versus Larry Flynt.
Yeah, People versus Larry Flynt. Things you probably didn't know about Larry Flynt. You probably knew that he did a skin mag called Hustler back in the day.
What? What are you talking about?
Well, look, and he bought my magazine, Film Threat, and allowed me to launch. I launched other magazines while I was there, like Wild Cartoon Kingdom and Sci-Fi Universe, which I believe Mark Altman and an investment group got the rights back or something to Sci-Fi Universe. In any case, and look, he was really good to me there. He basically gave me the rights to Film Threat back. It's your passion project. Just take on the subscription liability. But it was that was a different time. But I'm shocked. Like, and Rob, you and I have had these discussions about like what is going on with the world where certain things can't even be talked about. And then you see sober-minded people like whatever you think of him, Bill Maher, point this stuff out. I do think that Bill Maher's a little uninformed on certain things. I think he's being fed things by his producers and whatnot. But then other times he just freaking nails it.
Sometimes he nails it, but sometimes he's totally wrong too. Real quick though, I got a couple super chats that match up here. I want to read them. Darren said, Picard and IMAX, stoked for those able to attend. But
thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Darren. An additional super chat, let me find it all of a sudden. I lost it. Is asking, how in the world are they going to stop scalpers from grabbing tickets and selling them from some old guy in Hawaii? Thank you, some old guy.
Yeah, the tickets are free.
Right.
Yeah, so I think he's saying that people are going to try to sell them if they get them.
Yeah, no, I know. It's going to be crazy. I mean, I don't know why. Maybe they're free. It's perplexing to me. This was really interesting. So when we were working on the Next Generation Blu-rays, we had these 3 Fathom theatrical events, and we showed 2 episodes of the remastered TNG. Plus, I cut all the blooper reels on those things. It's so funny because they're all over the internet now. And I was the one that picked out all the bloopers. But they showed bloopers, then we showed a cut down version of our documentary. So it was a great event. And for season 3, they showed the best of both worlds. And Cliff Bowl, who directed the best of both worlds, Cliff Bowl complained to the studio and to the like DGA or the Writers Guild. And these were one night only events that all the proceeds went to charity. And they had to stop doing the events because Cliff Bowl bitched. And I was like, dude, it's a TV show that was made 25 years ago. And you get a one-night theatrical event where you can see your work from 25 years ago on a movie screen.
Because he wanted to get paid.
Theaters. I can feel that, Robert. I can really, truly feel that.
And it's gone.
Well, he wanted to get paid, right, Rob?
Yeah. He wanted, but it's like, okay, first of all, it was either you allow this to happen or it was never going to happen. This was a one-time only screening. And look, I get it. Everybody wants to get paid, but there was no apparatus. I think that's why they're giving the tickets away for free.
Right.
But what's funny is somebody has to pay for it. I mean, the theater, it's expensive to run IMAX.
Well, it makes you wonder, Rob. This is such let's talk about this for a second. And Chris, you jump in here too. But the fact that they're bringing this to IMAX and not just what we thought, which was in Southern California,
right,
all over the country, IMAX. What does that say about how Paramount feels about Picard season 3? Because they're dipping some money into the.
They did this. They did this with Rings of Power. Tickets were free, and then you got like a popcorn, a drink, and a candy. It was bizarre, and the theater was packed. I mean, they did pack the theater, and it was a big commercial for Amazon. And then they played the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power. I nearly fell asleep. I
understand.
But would they do that for the last
2 episodes? But why? Yeah, why for the last 2 episodes?
Well, because it's a success. That's what I'm saying. It's a success.
But how is this going to convert subscribers to watch more of the series?
Well, no. What I'm saying is it doesn't matter. There's a message here for us all, is that there is success here because you don't do this at the end. Rings of Power would have never put the last 2 episodes in theater because it was a shit show.
No, it was. I mean, it clearly.
Last episode.
Clearly, there is a feeling, and what it's really interesting to me because you guys were there. We sat next to each other.
Right.
You can see. It's been unfortunate. You can see how beautiful the cinematography actually is when you see it on the cinema screen. It's not like you should have to do that, but I found it fascinating watching it on my different. How watching on both TVs I've calibrated within an inch of their lives. One's a plasma, one's an OLED, and how one you can barely see anything.
Yeah, and the plasma blows it away.
The plasma blows it away.
Because
it can't handshake with the TV.
It's very odd.
So yeah, it's bizarre.
I remember when we watched the first 2. We watched the series on a TV, and then when we were with Rob watching it, I was like, well, how much more am I going to like it? We already know what's going to happen. We already saw this. And then we saw it on big screen. It was completely different experience.
It's so bizarre. Like the final time that I watched Picard season 3 all the way through was on Blu-ray. And it looked incredible. I mean, it's because the color, obviously, it's a darker palette. But when you see what it's actually supposed to look like, I mean, it's still dark, but you see everything. It's not too dark. And on my OLED, I thought something was wrong, and then I threw in a Dolby Vision disc in because I mean I calibrated myself. I know how good the screen looks. It looks incredible. Yeah, Chris,
No, really good point, Rob. And we're so lucky to get to see this. But Chris, what do you think about the fact that they are going to going through the effort for this? Does it? I mean, you know a lot about the internal workings. You and Rob both do. But what do you think the message is being said? What is the studio thinking? They got to be getting something out of this, right?
Well, this is all promotion, right? Yeah. They're gonna, and I do think actually seeing it on the big screen is going to get people more interested in more Trek, because I promise you, not only are you going to see the last 2 episodes kind of cut together as one movie, but you're going to see a trailer and get more Star Trek on Paramount Plus.
Right.
I mean, look, I'll be surprised if they don't hand out some comic or coupon or free Paramount Plus for a week trial, whatever. And there'll be a hashtag there. It's also, look, you're paying basically the whole quid pro quo for that is to get people to tweet about it on social media. So it will trend, because I hate to say this, Star Trek doesn't trend all that much anymore on social media, but this will guarantee that happens. I mean, Amazon got a lot of traction out of showing the first 2 episodes in a theater. And you kind of feel like, well, if all they want me to do is send out a tweet, sure, I'll do that. I sent out a tweet last week about climate change, so I fixed that. I guess I'll just do this because they gave me some popcorn and a free movie. But those things it's going to sell out quick. I mean, it's sold out really quick for Rings of Power. So I see this being pretty huge. I already got it in my calendar, so I'll be refreshing that link. Where's the link, Rob? Where's the link?
Well, the link apparently it's on the GoFobo or whatever. The link is down.
Uh-oh.
You can't even buy tickets yet. I mean, the tickets don't go on sale till 10 a.m. on the 12th, 2 days from now, so Wednesday.
Right.
Wow, that's
And
crazy.
we'll put the link in the description too.
So
So we got go ahead, Shane.
One more thing, just while we're on the topic, and I don't want to leave this because I think this is the most important thing that we're talking about. Everybody wants more Star Trek in the 25th century made by Terry Matalas, called Star Trek Legacy or whatever they want to call it. Is this a signal that even Alex Kurtzman's going to be attending the event? So, Rob, is this a signal that they're at least thinking about it?
No.
I want you to say yes.
I know. Unfortunately, here's the problem. They looked at Star Trek Picard as an ending. Season 3 of Picard was an ending. They hired somebody. Terry Matalas came in. They gave it to him because it didn't matter what happened. What Terry Matalas did, what any great creative does that has the leeway, is he took it and ran with it. And he had a vision. He made it happen. I mean, can you imagine? It couldn't have been easy to convince Patrick Stewart to do it. It couldn't have been easy.
According to Terry, it just required a bottle of wine.
Yeah, I mean, but still, it was, and he had to do a lot of battling,
Right.
to get what he wanted. But it was an end. There was no promise for him to do more. There was no, and I mean, if you think about it, the showrunner of Nancy Drew is the new showrunner of Star Trek Starfleet Academy or whatever it's going to be called. Nancy Drew.
Hold up, though. I was also on the fence, confused about it. Then I went back and looked at her work. It's Nancy Drew, Tom Swift, a lot of young people, dramatic
CW stuff.
Yes, that didn't go anywhere. Tom Swift canceled after one season.
But have you guys tried watching the Nancy Drew show? It's not good.
Yeah,
I'm a Nancy Drew fan from the books. I tried watching the show. I was like,
it's not made for it. I get. It's
I'm
not
more
good
Hardy
for us.
Boys.
But
It's not made for 40-year-old men.
Now, the Hardy Boys TV show that they did was actually pretty decent, but this Nancy Drew show wasn't good at all.
But
Did they make the Hardy Boys gay? If not, it's not even modern. It's not.
They didn't make him gay. No, they didn't make him gay.
They made Tom Swift gay though.
Did they make Tom Swift gay?
Yeah, Tom Swift was gay, super gay.
Oh my God! What about Danny Dunn? These are deep cuts. No one knows any of that.
I don't know.
What I don't understand is it's like trying to make fetch happen. They're trying to turn Star Trek into a show for like when I was 5 years old, I was attracted to Star Trek and there were no kids to be found.
Right.
And the 2 episodes that they had kids in them, Miriam and the children shall lead, wasn't a big fan. But I loved that show because it was people I would love to have become when I grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they keep trying to they've been trying to turn Star Trek into something that it isn't the whole time. Let's make it for younger people. Let's make it hip. Let's make it. And the thing is, that's not what Star Trek is.
Right.
Star Trek is, and I understand because it's a franchise, but they've been trying to turn Star Trek into something since 2009, and it hasn't worked. And the thing about Star Trek Picard, all the nitpicky things aside with season 3, the reason it's working for so many people is because it's about characters and story. And the audience of Star Trek recognizes that these characters are growing up the same way that we've all grown up. And they're dealing with real concerns. Like we all have concerns about family. We all have concerns about loved ones. We all have concerns about relationships that didn't work out. And those are all inherent in what season 3 addresses. So Star Trek is once again relevant to its audience. The problem that I've had with modern Star Trek is it used to be allegorical, so you could watch something that you understood was relating back to our world today. The actual stories that Star Trek has been telling with Discovery and Strange New Worlds, I'm looking at them going, what does this have to do with anything?
Right.
Give me one legitimate story that I feel is not an amalgamation. Like going back and watching the last episode of Strange New Worlds and how they used Balance of Terror.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get what Balance of Terror was about.
Right.
They just hung this story on Balance of Terror. And the point of that story is not in the story that they're telling.
Right.
And it's where which is wild. Like I watched this and I'm like, wow, you changed the relationship of the Romulan commander and his Centurion, which was odd to me. Like you had to, we have to change something. So we're going to make the relationship between those characters in the original Balance of Terror from the first season is incredibly important, because it's the first time in Star Trek history that you get a glimpse at an alien civilization and how they relate to one another.
Yes.
Right.
You know, and yeah, it's the Romans, I get all that, but still, those scenes with the Centurion and Mark Leonard as the Romulan commander are great.
Right.
They're some of the best written scenes in science fiction television history.
Agreed.
And when you saw what they did in Strange New Worlds, I'm like, wow.
What blows my mind, Rob, is that they were aware enough to know that Balance of Terror is this amazing episode that was incredible, but they weren't aware enough to be able to incorporate it in a way that makes sense for Star Trek. So what does that say about the people making the show? Do they, you know, there's this sense of lost? I don't know.
I think they're trying to find a clever way of introducing the new Kirk character.
Well, and I mean, no offense to that actor, but
Paul
that
Wesley.
guy's not James T. Kirk.
I know.
Of course not. Yeah.
You know, there's no.
His neck is too thin, man.
Well, it's all just. It was such a weird choice to make. I watched Strange New Worlds, and to me, it's like watching a Vegas show version of Star Trek. Tonight at the Wynn Casino, Star Trek on the big stage,
and this ain't Star Trek.
I mean, this is for the first time live in front of a studio audience. Star Trek. The sets look like they're a Vegas stage. The costumes are Vegas. The girls are. See a handsome leading man and see his crew of hotties. Sexually ambiguous hotties that he cooks for, and they're one step away from him.
It's not even as good as the Axel Braun Star Trek. So, for those of you,
hey, we got a super chat from
oeuvre of Axel Braun.
Axel Braun. I'm gonna look it up. Oliver
Look it up. Definitely look it up.
For $5, just wanted to say thanks for retweeting my post about Star Trek Legacy. It really helped to get out there to more people. Yeah, you know, it's not just the Star Trek Legacy stuff on Twitter, but StarTrekLegacy.com, TerryTrek.com, you know, change.org/Star Trek Legacy.
And it takes people like you, Oliver, and thank you for doing that. So it takes a lot of us like that to get the word out, to make it more visible. I know Rob said they're probably not, and he's right. We, as far as we know, there's been no movement forward on Star Trek Legacy, but you know, as long as people keep getting the word out, we can at least have some hope. You know, the story always goes back to Alex Kurtzman being, assaulted at Comic-Con over us needing Pike back in Star Trek. So, you know, hopefully we can do that for for Star Trek Legacy as well. So,
yeah,
I mean, I'd like to see that. What's really interesting is that what you should really be looking at as far as Terry Matalas is concerned is not Picard season 3, but 12 Monkeys. And if you want to have somebody who's making a thoughtful science fiction show, I mean, we've all seen a million different iterations of time travel. And I just watched all 4 seasons, pretty much binge them. It's incredible how well thought out that show is.
It's pretty brilliant.
And how it approaches the tropes of time travel. And I would say, look, and Terry brought a lot of his collaborators, not just Stashwick and Matt and Christopher Monfett and all those people, Sean. He brought his collaborators with him.
Right.
And if he were to do that again, conceive of a Star Trek show from the ground up, I would be very interested to see what he would create. But the problem is, what's the incentive for Secret Hideout to do that? You know, they bring all these people on. It's not controlled necessarily by Alex Kurtzman, which is interesting because he'd still get the executive producer credit and still make the money.
Right.
Before you answer that, super chat from Adam Van Jensen on season 4 of 12 Monkeys, and it's amazing. Thanks, Terry. It really is.
It really is. Thank you.
It is. And I would think that, like, if you control the Star Trek franchise and you get your name on it, who cares who makes it? Like bring in a team of people and you're getting your
Could there be like a Berman Braga relationship here where it's like Kurtzman at the top and then Terry right underneath him, where he's running the day-to-day and Kurtzman can just kind of like peek in? And
that would make Akiva pretty mad. So
yeah, I mean, I think, but Akiva's got his own things going too. You know, he's got Strange New Worlds, but he's moved on to other things and he's got stuff. I mean, that's, again, you know, you're dealing with egos and everything. I would just say that if you're getting money anyway, let Terry and let his collaborators, because, you know, every TV show, you have to crew it up. You have to find a writing staff. And when you even read what they defined the Starfleet Academy show as being, first loves, rivalries. I'm like, what the hell does this have to do with Star Trek?
It's not Star Trek. Yeah.
You're going to make a generic teen. I did a thing on this where I just read 50 TV shows that are about teenagers and college students, and 50 movies, the titles of 50 movies that are about teenagers and college students. And what that's going to end up being is a show about teenagers and college students, as opposed to a Star Trek show. Because where can they go?
Well, they don't want to lose the Discovery audience. I mean, they have planned to continue. I mean, think about it. If they did something else, let's say they did something forwarding the story of 7 of 9, maybe with Janeway. I don't know where I heard that, but maybe that's possible.
Maybe it's possible.
So if that were to happen, I mean, where would the people who've embraced Discovery go? Because they've put such a divide between the fan bases on kind of the style of Star Trek. You almost have to have it, which I'm fine. There can be Star Trek for everybody. If you continue having 4 or 5 shows, no skin off my teeth. Let's do that. But we need to have continued Star Trek going into the 25th century, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you can have something for everyone as long as I'm one of those everyone. That's all I'm saying. Hey, Super Chat from Tom, actually, what he says here about, in my opinion, when I looked at it, I thought about the Kurtzman-Terry relationship. Tom, for $20, thank you, Tom, says, the bittersweet truth that one will never be great at everything is the most powerful realization. We all have talents and skills, but some will be better. To support others that are more qualified is a gift, not a curse. Unfortunately, I don't think everyone understands that, and especially the really arrogant people in that lead Hollywood studios.
Thank you, Tom. Good one there. Thank you for that support.
Well, the real problem is it's so expensive now to make movies and television that if you are if you're a studio head or you're working at a network and you greenlight something and it fails, that's your career. If it fails big, that is your career. And so there's too much money involved. So there's too many people that are covering their ass because nobody wants to fail. So they're doing everything they can to make shows that are as riskless, risk-free as possible.
Risk aversion, yeah.
Risk aversion is exactly where they want to be.
And that's when you cue the Captain Handsome and demisexual space ladies. Thank you, Darren, for $2.
I mean, what's really interesting to me is without new IP, and we've seen how new IP, John Wick, John Wick, new IP. It's 4 movies in, but that was something new that came out of nowhere. People didn't realize that John Wick was going to catch fire with the audience the way it did, and it did. Super Mario Brothers. I mean, they made a movie 30 years ago, but now you've got the biggest opening for an animated film of all time.
Can I make a point about that for you? Can I make a point? So Super Mario Brothers, I've seen it. I think we've all seen it. It's going to make $1 billion, which I will say that we predicted. And a lot of people said would not happen. But here's the thing. It's not that great of a movie. It's just an okay movie.
Right.
And people are going ape shit over it. So what does that tell you when an average movie that just sticks to the rules of movie making that we've been used to for decades and doesn't keep giving us this kind of bullshit that we've been dealing with can make this much money? Is this going to send a message to the studios?
Well, I gotta say, you don't think it's a good movie. You remember though, you're saying it's an okay movie because it sticks to the right story thing. It doesn't preach. It just tells a good story. But then there's a slightly younger generation that played every one of those games, saw every single reference as it was happening, and was going gaga apeshit the entire time. That was my generation.
No. I mean, I was 14 or 12 when the game came out. I'm right there along with you. I'm just saying the movie wasn't that great.
It was just an okay movie. It's a family-friendly movie, though, right? Like adults and kids can go and watch the movie and enjoy it. Right. I think that's something that's missing. Like if you look at modern Star Trek, there's cursing, there's nudity, there's graphic violence. It's like all this stuff that you couldn't get away with on network TV, which made it a family show. And up to whole new generations.
Okay. But go back to Top Gun Maverick. Okay, go back to last year. Another down the middle of the road, just does the movie properly, like we do them, right? And they're just there's no wokeism, there's no messages. I mean, is this sending messages to the studio that they need to do different, Rob or Chris?
I think what's interesting is that I think a lot of people at the studios are perplexed by the fact that the popularity of Super Mario Brothers. You know, Illumination wasn't, obviously, and certainly Universal. They opened Super Mario Land, you know, the Nintendo Land or whatever that people love.
Yeah, they're ready for it.
And I think that the studios, it's weird to me. I think that there's a lot of people that just don't know these kinds of things. Obviously, somebody did because they greenlit this movie, and it's done very well. You know, obviously it did well, but it was something that was all you had to make. You guys pointed it out. If you just made a competent movie that touched everybody's, I mean, people forget that goes all the way back to Donkey Kong in the beginning of the 80s.
Right.
You know, that was the first time I saw Mario, was playing Donkey Kong in the arcade, you know, and so Mario has been around for 43 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's multiple game consoles. How many people have played? You've got generations of people that know this character, and they gave you the kind of iconography that was fun. You know,
there's 25 years of references, though. There's references from games that came out 5 years ago. In that
amazing. It was amazing. And while it wasn't a classic, I wouldn't say it's Snow White or Pinocchio or anything like that. It doesn't have that, or even the Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast. What it did do was it provided everything the audience wanted from the movie.
Boom. That's it.
That's what they got from it. And the same was true of Top Gun.
You got what you paid for.
You could say that, the ending of Top Gun is the Death Star trench run. The only difference is 1 meter, 3 meters instead of 2, you know?
Yes.
And they gave you enough, but they also gave you a little bit new. Tom Cruise's character, in a way, I was calling Star Trek Picard season 3 the Top Gun Maverick of Star Trek.
Yes.
Before it aired, because they gave me that kind of thing. They gave me everything that I wanted. And you could level and I was saying this too, that it's kind of Star Trek's greatest hits in a way, but you know, it's in people's lives, there are recurring themes. People have children, you know, and people are like, well, it's like when Kirk, you know, Kirk didn't know David Marcus, and it was different. Kirk knew that David Marcus existed.
Right.
But like he tells Dr. Marcus, I stayed away.
Yep.
You know, and I wanted him in mine. You know, they had that conversation before. So, but the idea that people have children, and in a spacefaring race, it was not surprising that people have kids and they decide to part ways. Like, I'm going to be an archaeologist and I'm going to keep my kid here with me, and you're going to go off amongst the stars. And I thought Beverly Crusher's, when she makes that speech in the show, and she says, look, I lost my parents to space. I lost my husband to space. My son was taken by somebody we met in space, you know.
Right.
And I'm left with no family. And I got pregnant probably because she was probably, you know, older. She used medical technology to make sure she could carry her pregnancy to term, and took off, you know, and didn't want to face Jean-Luc Picard because you have a target on you, and my son would be in total mortal danger all the time. And she wasn't wrong. And so I'm like, that's an interesting, and then she goes and becomes a Doctor Without Borders, you know, that I like that. I'm like, that's a really interesting way to see Beverly. And when Picard says, you know, we tried 5 times, it didn't work out. I know what that's like. I've dated people that I, to this day, still love, that I dated, and it just didn't work out between us.
I saw a really cool poster, a mock poster on Twitter that had Gaze McFadden, and it said Frontier Medicine. Like a spin-off series of her and Jack's time. It's pretty cool.
I mean, Gates McFadden is 74 years old. You know,
and great in the show. She looks great.
Yeah, and it's the youngest member of the original cast is LeVar Burton, who's 66. You know, Michael Dorn's 70, Frakes is 70, Patrick Stewart's 82.
97.
But they couldn't add one scene in the Star Wars sequels where Han, Luke, and Leia got together in a scene.
That scene that we didn't get.
People were complaining
and it's like, you know, look, if I sat there with my kid and we watched Return of the Jedi, I would just tell them there are no more Star Wars movies after this. This is the end. Because can you imagine
the end.
rescue of Han Solo, this triumphant moment, and then everything is effed up and it all happened off screen. It is utterly ridiculous. That was a conscious decision, and probably one of the worst decisions in movie history. And Kathleen Kennedy should have been fired after that first movie. Even though
somehow Palpatine returned. You have like the resistance within like the major government. It's like, why isn't the military up against it?
Ridiculous.
Like none of it made any sense.
None of it.
But Chris, you're right though. You had the ability to bring these 3 back together again after all this time, and you consciously decided not to. The difference between this and Picard is at the end of the last episode, they were all around the table again.
Well,
you had the ability to bring them all around the table, and you did.
Do you remember J.J. Abrams' quote about that, where it's like early scripts had Luke in it, but every time Luke was on screen, it took away from the new characters. It was like, yeah, maybe like have the new characters take a back seat and have the torch pass gradually to them.
Right. As opposed movie, or pass off the torch so that they'll do a trilogy with those newly introduced characters, the ones that are popular. But he was doing these Star Wars movies like he did television, just making it up as he went. It was ridiculous. But back to a point you guys were talking about earlier about modern Hollywood. Things have become so expensive because of so many aspects of the industry that have nothing to do with making movies.
Yeah.
Some examples. Intimacy coordinator is a whole new position that didn't exist until a few years ago. That's a new job.
Can I get that job?
COVID compliance officer is a job on a film set. You've got your zones, and everybody's got to be tested. Terry Matalas has a good story about that he should be allowed to tell at some point. That just shows the ridiculous levels that Hollywood has overreacted to that. The other thing is all the diversity stuff. That's a whole new department at film studios now, where we have to have that. Why? Because I don't know, maybe we want to win awards, we want to look good. I'm telling you, I hope that Hollywood dies and a different industry rises in its place. If you look at one of my best movie of last year was not made in this country. And I still believe that Best Picture should go to an American movie. I don't know why we're the only award show that doesn't do this. The BAFTAs, France has their own version, Japan. They give awards to movies made in their country. We don't do this in America. The movies nominated for Best Picture for the Academy Award should be American films, period. End of story. It's stupid that we don't do this. But you're going to see in India, my point about RRR being the best movie of last year, we can't even make a movie like that. Hollywood can't make a movie like that. It's about friendship. There's a little bit of history in there. They play with it a lot. But it's, again, that Hollywood movie that Kevin Feige aspires to do. But the point I was going to make about India is that giant continent, this country that has multiple languages, and they have multiple film industries. There is movies made in Hindi. There's Telugu, which RRR is Telugu. It's
Tollywood, not Bollywood. There's Bollywood and Tollywood.
Look, I was educated in this. I did my first review of RRR. Clearly, I love the movie, but I had no idea what I was talking about. And then was educated by, oddly enough, people watching from India, the Film Threat YouTube channel. But back to that, my thought is that something needs to change in America. If Hollywood is not going to make American movies, anyone can. There's no barrier to entry for making an independent film. Sure, you got to cobble together the financing through a lot of different crazy ways, but there are a lot of things you don't need to spend money on if you're going to make an independent film. And there could arise a real competitor to Hollywood if some other industry just especially with AI coming. I really think that what's going to happen with a lot of modern effects is artists will still be in charge, but there's a lot of AI that's going to take care of these, especially the Marvel movies. You're gonna see that. But
here we go.
Anyways, all I'm saying is there may be the future of American film may be a divided industry. It's worked out well in India actually because the industries they're competitive, but in a friendly way. Tollywood and Bollywood, but they are very different in tone. So just wanted to mention.
I loved that movie. I thought everyone kept telling me to watch it, and I was like, I don't want to watch a movie with subtitles or whatever, and still did. I loved it. Hey, super chat from Jalea Tyson. Why would a writer write a new IP and sell it only to have the studio attach a creator to it that butchers their work and characters?
Well, you got to have power. Look at George R.R. Martin, right? Like he's heavily involved in House of the Dragon. I think turned out very well.
Yep.
So you literally have to be, and there are certain people who've been able to thread that needle of politicking and being you as much need to be a creative person as a diplomat. Rob, you know that.
Yeah, no,
I mean, I can just say I'm a terrible diplomat. I'm a terrible diplomat. So I'm not going to have a Hollywood career. But James Gunn is very good at being a diplomat. So is Christopher Nolan. So George R.R. Martin somehow got himself in that position. I mean, first of all, it's nearly impossible to make anything decent, but to politic that and put yourself in a position of power that you are able to do what you want, that's tough. Rob, I'm sure you can speak to that because
I mean, George R.R. Martin also worked on like the Beauty and the Beast television series with Linda Hamilton back in the 80s.
Right.
He worked on the Phil DeGuerre reboot of The Twilight Zone also in the mid 80s. So he had a long history. The new Outer Limits show adapted his story Sand Kings. So he's had a pretty long history dabbling with Hollywood. And it's interesting. You look at, just today, I was reading an article, I don't know where it was on, maybe it was on Screen Rant or something. Naren Shankar, who was one of the showrunners of The Expanse, talked about how he dreaded working with the two writers that wrote those books. And then when he started interacting with them and he realized how great it was to work with them, his fears were quickly swept aside, and how good they were with plotting and how certain things they would drop in the first book paid off in the third book. And it turns out that they had a really great relationship. Not everybody has that. Not everybody, you have to have a certain kind of personality. You have to be open to collaboration. A lot of, say, like novelists are not good at that. They're not good at collaborating. It's funny because a lot of all the people that I've met that are heroes of mine, some of the people that most disappointed me were novelists. And anybody I know that I'm friends with who's a novelist that I've worked with, that's not you. These are not people I've ever worked with. But it's really interesting because when you follow somebody's work and you feel like they're a part of you, they get in your head. And when you meet them in real life, sometimes they can be very introverted, or they're not like, hey man, how's it going? They're novelists.
Yeah, or just assholes. Stephen King.
I'm a published novelist, and in fact, I was watching an interview with Mark Greaney on the Joe Rogan podcast this morning, and he's the guy who wrote the Gray Man books.
Oh, okay.
And the Russo brothers basically came in and turned his books into a Netflix original film.
Yep, that cost $220 million.
And he basically said he was like, it basically had nothing to do with my book. Once I optioned it, I had basically no feedback on those books whatsoever. And it was interesting because he talked about at one point Charlize Theron, who'd just come off of Mad Max Fury Road, she was going to be cast as the Ryan Gosling character in the movie, and Greaney basically said, he's like, I'm cool with Charlize Theron and all, but the whole purpose of making a movie out of my books is to sell more books because it gives it exposure. And if you have a female gray man on the cover, in the movie, and on the cover of the book, it's like a dude, and because like in the book it's a man, he's like, people are going to get confused, and so like that didn't make any sense to me. And he was just talking about how powerless he was in the entire process of adapting his books into a movie. And most people don't understand that most novelists don't have any say in the filmmaking process.
No, and it's kind of it's a real bummer. I mean, I think that I've been working on a project, a screenplay with the novelist that the movie would be based on his book, and I've wanted to make this movie for a very long time, and I would not have it any other way. You have to, because the whole point is if you adapted, and it's the second book I've adapted in a screenplay form, and I work with the author on the first book as well, and you want to, they haven't gotten made yet, but you still want to do that. And I think one of the it's very weird to see certain projects in Hollywood, they start as one thing, and because of people's involvement and ego and everything, they're transmuted into something that doesn't resemble anything like what it was supposed to be when they first started. And it's wild to watch that happen. And I've seen that. There was a great couple. It was also on Screen Rant. There was a great article about the history of the original Super Mario Brothers movie, which I had a little bit. I worked on that at an effects company when Greg Beeman, who directed Mom and Dad Save the World, was directing it. And because that movie didn't do well, they decided he was fired, and all the work, millions of dollars worth of work, it was going to be a very traditional Mario Brothers movie. They got rid of all that. And the makeup effects company that I was working at, Altarian Studios, we had been working on Army of Darkness and the Swamp Thing TV series and the Stephen King movie Sleepwalkers, and all of some of the greatest makeup effects, physical makeup effects people in Hollywood were working at Altarian on Super Mario Brothers. All this cool stuff was being made, and they just decided to scrap it all and go in a different direction.
Yeah.
And if you read this article about how many screenwriters, and it turned into a big clusterfuck. And it's just amazing what happens. But a lot of the time, there's nobody at the top that knows. You'd be surprised at how many people they really don't know, because there's no other industry where the gatekeepers of the industry haven't actually done the thing that they're gatekeeping.
Dude, people in the middle don't know either. Johnny Legs on that Mario Brothers movie was talking about how good the movie was and how the studio didn't market it properly, and that's why it wasn't it wasn't well received. And I'm like, did we see different movies, Johnny?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that the people that work at studios, a lot of them have never made a movie. They've never produced a movie. They never were PAs on movies. And they're in charge. Like, you go in and you're pitching somebody who's never made a movie before, and you're trying to convince them to let you make a movie with their company. They're going to give you money, and they themselves have never made a movie. So how do they know? And it's crazy that that's how the business works, but that's how the business works. That's why, if you can go find out and you can raise the money by yourself, although it's incredibly difficult, especially making independent movies at $5 million or less, to get your money back. Unless you have a big sale at Sundance or South by Southwest, and somebody takes a movie that you spent $5 million on and gives you $20 million for it, where you can return money to your investors plus 30%, which is what I would try and do. It's very difficult to get movies, to make movies at a lower budget level that you can pay back your investors.
Yeah, same in TV though. Real quick, from Matthew Hammond, I am sorry that Star Trek was treated this bad. I'm so glad Amazon has not done anything with the Stargate series, as they would not give it back to Brad Wright. MGM going bankrupt might have protected the Stargate series. Well, I mean,
thank you for the super chat, Matthew. That's very generous.
MGM went bankrupt multiple times, but Amazon bought MGM.
But I think that don't worry, somebody's going to do Stargate again.
Yeah,
for
sure.
We know that there's stuff in the works, and Matthew's probably seen some of our videos on it. That I mean, there's part of us that does agree that we're kind of glad Amazon hasn't done Stargate yet, because they're doing so many terrible things. I mean, they've got some good shows, and they've got some really bad shows. The Boys is fine. The Expanse was great, but Rings of Power is terrible. So, I mean, yeah, it's a quagmire. I think you were talking about earlier. Chris, you were going to jump in and say something, I think.
Oh, I just want to say shout out to Matthew Hammond. He's often in our live stream chats on Film Thread. So I just want to say hi to him and just echo what Rob said. It is so, but I do believe there is a new formula, Rob. I do believe that, look, there's struggle comes with being an independent filmmaker. It's always there. I would recommend a Substack and a newsletter from a guy named Ted Hope. You might recognize the name. He was one of the producers on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And if you look up his resume, he's involved in almost every weird indie film that you love. But it's always about reinventing what the formula is. And I think with crowdfunding sources, I think with companies like Legion M, who just did that the Shatner documentary, which was at Sundance, or excuse me, South by Southwest. Companies like Legion M, their work is really amazing. They do challenging genre movies.
Yeah.
They did Mandy with Nicolas Cage. They did Colossal. So they've done some really great things. So I think that there's a new formula that has to be reinvented. I mean, look, for Attack of the Doc, it's a super low budget archival documentary, which I just had a friend do an archival doc for Peacock. He made a movie called I Love You, You Hate Me. And it's a documentary about Barney the dinosaur.
That's awesome.
It's a brilliant doc series. His name is Tommy Avalone, doc filmmaker who made a movie about Bill Murray. It's called Bill Murray Stories, about all the sightings of Bill Murray. All the different Yeah. Anyway, so Tommy's made these like super low budget. He made a movie about I Am Santa Claus, about people who dress as Santa Claus during the holiday season. He's made a lot of like these small, low budget docs. Then he did this thing for Peacock. And I asked him, I said, so what was the budget on your doc? I was just curious. He said $3 million for two hours of content. And he said the best part was they have a travel coordinator that just sends you a package, and here's the driver's picking you up, and you go to the airport, you go to the, your hotel's all handled, and he said that was the best part. Because just as like, look, I made a small doc, Attack of the Doc. It's an archival doc, which is a whole different kind of doc. But easily, if I had done it the correct way, it would have easily been $1 million+ documentary. Easily $1 million. So I did it low budget, kind of, on the fly, which is an approach that can work. But,
we made a doc about Galaxy Quest that cost $14 and a pack of Red Bull.
Yeah, exactly. No, but like this is what I'm saying is the formula needs to be cracked, and there are other places like that you can go to in terms of distribution. You can self-distribute. You could just throw the movie on Vimeo and sell it, or you could go to a company like Indie Rights. Indie Rights posts their distribution contract on the website. It's just right there. You can read it, download it, read it, submit your movie. I'm just saying these are other places to go. There's also plenty of other distributors out there that put out good stuff.
Well, even, it's interesting, and people they dinged me for this when I brought it up on my own channel. The Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's The Daily Wire, started to acquire movies and put them out, and they have a distribution model with their subscription base.
Right.
And they picked up, what was it, Run, Hide, Fight?
Yeah.
And they picked that up. That was their first movie. And when I came out and said it was interesting, people like, oh, are you supporting Ben Shapiro? And I'm like, it's not about his political ideology.
It's okay. You'll know that Rob's not supporting him unless he starts doing ad reads for gold and silver stocks. That's when you know.
But also, but even like Dallas Saunier, the producer who was making things like Dragged Across Concrete and Bone Tomahawk, and like he's teamed up with the guys at the Daily Wire. And look, the whole point, it's not just enough to get money to make a movie. You have to get distribution. You have to get your money back. How do you get your money back, and how do you get it back to your investors? And that is the real key. And if the Daily Wire has a model where you can get your money back, then independent filmmakers are going to go. I mean, I know they have a political bent to what they're acquiring, but still, it's a place. I'm not saying that you have to believe in their political slant. I mean, they're obviously a conservative channel, but hey, if you want to make a low budget independent movie that has a conservative bent to it, or a subject matter that's going to appeal to a conservative audience, more power to you. Go to the Daily Wire.
If it's just apolitical.
It's also the movies, the narrative films they made are all apolitical. Shut In, Run, Hide, Fight, The Terror on the Prairie with Gina Carano. They were all just movies. The ones that like What Is a Woman, by Matt Walsh, that was completely different. That came, but look, let me just say on that documentary, I find it unconscionable that other media outlets didn't cover it. We were one of the few outlets that actually, one of only 5 media outlets that wrote a review of What Is a Woman was Film Threat on and we're a Rotten Tomatoes approved media outlet. So whatever. But I don't know why people are afraid. Review it. Give it a bad review. Disagree with
give it a review. Yeah, any review. Yeah.
Any review. But the cowardly nature of people who I'm talking about other critics that write about this stuff, not necessarily ones on YouTube, because it did get a lot of play on YouTube, at least caused discussion. And it's kind of out of the wheelhouse of nerd stuff. But we cover indie film at Film Threat, so it's in our wheelhouse. And I was like, why is no one writing a review of this? So I subscribed to the Daily Wire just to see the movie so I could talk about it,
I hate to break in here, but we got to talk about some gold shares. Our buddies over at the gold. No,
okay, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to do a documentary with all you guys, okay? It's going to be called YouTuber. And we're just going to tell this entire story. I want to talk about it afterwards. It's something I've been thinking about.
We got some super chats from Not a Band account, and I'm going to read these in successions because they're all referring to Picard season 3, and anyone here can probably answer these questions. So from the first one, he says, why did season 3 need a torture scene and dark lighting, referring to when Worf and Rafi tortured the changeling and how dark everything was? Now, we've talked about the darkness a million times, but we'll briefly talk about that again. Rob, how about the torture scene?
Well, okay. I would say that, again, Star Trek has always been allegorical in terms of you're dealing with terrorism, and you're also dealing with the idea that you're in the wake of the Dominion War, And one of the greatest episodes of Deep Space Nine was called In the Pale Moonlight. And in that episode, sanctioned murder happens to bring the Romulans into the war. And famously, Sisko is questioning, he will be haunted forever. And at the end of that episode, he says, I can live with it. He's trying to talk himself. He'll never be able to live with it. He'll have to live down the fact that he sinned, just like Michael Corleone killed his own brother. He will never be absolved of what he did, but what he did may have ended the Dominion conflict and save billions of lives.
Right.
I would say that in the wake of this, and a lot of what's going on with the changelings, and we saw Vadic's her whole reason for being is that, you know, one of the things I've often said is when utopia is confronted, you have a great utopian civilization. How does a utopia stay a utopia in the face of people that aren't utopians coming to destroy your civilization? How do you sack up and prevent your society from falling? What you have to do is, unfortunately, you have to use tactics that are abhorrent to you.
In the military, there was a term. Sometimes good men have to do bad things for good reasons.
Well, that's exactly right. And the funny thing about it is, one of the things that people often criticize Deep Space Nine for, this is not Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future. And I'm like, I would counter and say, no, you're watching people who had a genocidal extinction level event conflict put down their throats. How do they retain their ideals in the face of that? And that was something that I thought Deep Space Nine always dealt with quite well. And it's, you know, was that different than what Roddenberry wanted? Roddenberry was a World War II vet. And I would say that one of the interesting things about season 3 of Picard is it's not like they're tearing out Ichib's eye. You know, it's not, but yeah, they resorted, like, even when they're questioning Kryn, or when they were when they found out the first changeling and they didn't let him look, they'd already murdered people, and Worf's a Klingon, you know, and it's like in his mind, I would think that he would probably say, well, you people have dishonored yourselves. You killed innocents, you know, not even to accomplish anything, just as a smokescreen so in Worf's mind, and people are like, well, why is he beheading people? It's like, look, man, when Duras killed Kalar, he went and killed Duras. You know, there's no, and I would say that this is, I understand you didn't see this in the original series, but, you know, we're looking at a different time, different groups of people, and I don't have a problem with it. You know, I don't have a problem. I think that, and in the case that when you see how it all unfolds, there's some shit about to go down, and a lot of people are going to get hurt, and, you know,
that's
a lot of people have already been hurt.
Well, you got to figure that, you know, the whole scene with Rafi and Worf, and I think that's the one he's talking about. You know, hundreds of people were just killed. This changeling was directly responsible for that happening. And frankly speaking, they need answers. And so, you know, they weren't waterboarding him, but they were definitely roughing him up a little bit. And I think that was okay.
Also, they didn't even know he was a changeling at first.
That's true.
That's true. The dark lighting thing we've talked about a few times. I'll quickly say, you know, it's 2023. It's not 1993. So style, lenses, cameras, cinematography, these things all evolve over time. And this is a modern TV show.
But I will say but on the side of people that are upset about the darkness, I don't think they took into consideration necessarily that there's so many different types of television sets, the way it's going to be seen. And I think that's something that they probably should have. And then to top that off, Paramount had problems like matching it with the streaming. So there were a lot of issues here. And it hasn't taken away from me, but for others, maybe it has.
There were some technical difficulties for sure. This is a question I want to direct toward Matt. From Not a Band Account again. Why does Picard season 3 use modern slang unlike TNG? For you, Matt. Yeah.
I don't know. You would think that it would be consistent, right? But
that's why I'm asking you, because I already know your answer for this.
Well, I mean, like there's this thing called internal consistency within narratives, right? Which means that if you establish something, you carry it through, and if you should deviate on that consistency, you better have a good explanation for it. Otherwise, it just comes off as false. Now, we all know that basically the Kurtzman era of Star Trek just threw all consistency out the window because they're doing their own thing. You got Spock has a sister, you have holograms on the original Enterprise, you got all this stuff which breaks canon. And I think that for the most part, when it comes to the Picard series, Patrick Stewart was basically just like, I don't want to be constrained by what came before. And so they gave the actors leeway to curse. They gave them leeway to use slang. Personally, I wouldn't have done it that way, but I'm not.
And also, we got to
Trek.
remember that network television is different than now streaming services. So back
I
on network television,
I call bullshit on that.
It's true. You don't think they'd be dropping some cuss words back in the day if they could have?
I'm sure that they might have, but at the same time, it's like if just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's the old Malcolm thing, right? It's like you guys were so concerned with whether or not you could do this, you didn't think about whether you should. And if you think about if you think about the audience for Star Trek, a lot of old school Star Trekkers want to be able to watch it with their kids and pass on their love of the series. And they can't do that when you have people's eyeballs being plucked out and heads being chopped off and Klingon titties and like dropping dipshits from Chicago left and right. It's not something that is consistent with what came before. And so just because you can do that stuff and make it like edgy doesn't mean that you should do that, right? Because they're trying to say like, oh, we're trying to bring in the cool kids to like Star Trek. We're going to try to succeed where J.J. Abrams failed. And that's just not the case.
I think they were just making it
alienating. Well, I think you're alienating like a whole segment because there are Star Trek fans out there who are like, I don't like the cursing. I don't like the graphic violence. I don't like the dark tone. Like, where's the Star Trek I grew up with? Why isn't this show being made for me? And I think that like you could make a bright, optimistic, G-rated version of Star Trek that appeals to everyone, as opposed to making a dark, version of Star Trek with cursing and sex and stuff like that alienates half of your established fan base.
Yeah, Star Trek Prodigy's there. No problem. Good.
I think I'm with Kadish on this, actually. I think that they could just as easily have written a Star Trek show with no profanity at all.
Yep,
and concentrate on just making it proper English, because to me it sounds too colloquial, too of today. When I hear people swear, and it's funny that not because I'm a prude, and I believe me, I've got the most graphically violent and horribly. If people looked at my film collection, they're like, "Why do you have this?" And I'm like, "Because it's awesome." Yeah, but it's anti-human. And I'm like, I know. I've got a lot of exploitation films.
Rob,
a lot of people
wouldn't dig. Solo in your collection?
I do. I've got Solo. I've got a Serbian film.
Dude, your house is about to get raided by the FBI, bro.
Yeah, I'm telling you. But I also think that Star Trek is a 4-quadrant family show, and I understand that you want to make it edgier so it doesn't seem as squeaky clean as the original series, but you can deal with that through the subject matter. You can make something even like an episode in TNG, like The Survivors with John Anderson in the 3rd season, when you find out that you don't understand the scope of my crime. I've destroyed all the Husnock everywhere. I mean, one being committed total genocide against a race. That's pretty hardcore.
Right.
And Picard, he's like, I love that episode so much. And Picard's like, we don't even have this. We can't even comment on what you've done. It's so horrific what you've done that our justice has no word. There's nothing I can say to judge you.
Right.
You literally one being committed genocide, and that's hardcore. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, wow, that is a serious subject matter to come out of this episode that's the same episode. Nice house, good tea, good tea, nice house. It's that episode. So you go from Worf zingers to genocide.
Right.
And Star Trek is good at that. And it doesn't need, you don't need graphic violence, even though in the course of the original series, a lot of people died. People died on starships, people died on away missions, people died. But you weren't lingering on it's not that the deaths didn't happen. They happened. And sometimes, like at the end of Balance of Terror, when Tomlinson dies, you see Kirk going in and comforting the crew member who lost her fiance.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody died, whatever. And it's bad news, but it's the way it's presented.
Right.
And I do think that modern Star Trek could, when people swear, I think anybody who's a Star Trek fan, even me, it takes me out of it.
It does, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the swearing feels of today. I don't
Right.
think in the 25th century people would be using the same swear words.
Yeah, that's
You know,
why
if-
Battlestar Galactica did it very well. They changed the swear words so that they were actually evolved versions. And
But I mean, like you also have a situation where you have like multiple TV shows over multiple seasons that were able to get away with no hardcore, language, So it is doable. It's just that they chose not to do it because they're lazy.
So from Christopher Mays for $9.99. Thank you, Christopher. More on the slang cursing discussion. How is the franchise supposed to grow if parents today don't feel like they can watch Star Trek with their kids? ?
I think that's actually a really good point. And there is a feeling of when there's cursing, it does. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When Picard drops that first F-bomb, it took me back. Like I was, it did. It had that. And I remember saying after I saw it, I'm like, if people are going to be upset, this is one of the things they're going to be upset about. And it's true. And that was one of the things that bothered people. But, I also, like you guys, wanted my kids to like Star Trek. And they haven't. So I haven't had this problem. I'm going to let the rest of you guys weigh in because they don't like Star Trek. They don't want to like it. So I can't watch it with my kids. But I get what you're saying.
I'm getting my kids to like it. I started with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and now they're into that. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to Enterprise because Enterprise is a little more.
They're never gonna bite that one.
No, they might though. They might, bro. I'm telling you.
Rob, do your girls watch Star Trek?
No, I'm sorry. I'm going from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to Chuck to Enterprise. That way they see some of the same actors.
I appreciate your game plan.
But then kids today, a lot of them don't watch movies at all.
True.
I've tried to show. I honestly believe that cinema is the art form of the 20th century. And I think now we live in the post-cinema age. People like narrative. They'll always watch those things. But young people, they have the benefit of being the protagonists in their own ongoing reality show. They're documenting every day on TikTok. They're watching reels on Instagram and YouTube.
You're right.
They
are the main character. They're the main character.
And they're playing video games where they're the protagonist.
Yeah.
To love narrative is to look outside yourself.
Right.
And nowadays, even the activism we've seen, the reason that there's so many young activists is because it makes them feel better.
Right.
Gives them attention.
And they get that immediate attention. You're immediately part of a tribe. If you're fighting for somebody, then suddenly it's weird because normal adolescence, everybody was weird and awkward. You had jobs. Kids don't have jobs anymore. Some do. But it's like I was 16 years old. The day I turned 16, I had my license.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
and I was out driving. The first thing I did was pick up my friends and we went and saw a movie at a place that was hard to get to on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, Rob, you and I are so much alike. I bought a car 2 years before I turned 16, and most guys wanted a car. Why? Because they wanted to date ladies. They wanted to have a private place to be intimate with a woman. That was one reason I had a car. But the reason I wanted to have a car is so I could go and see every movie that opened on a Friday.
Yep,
every
that was it.
Movie. I knew all the theaters, and then I went to the
baby.
I went to the drive.
My first
repertory theaters to see like old movies. Like I saw like all the John Waters movies. I saw they did a James Dean marathon at the Punch and Judy Theater in Detroit. I had a car so I could go see movies because you can only ask your mom to drop you off at the movies so many times.
My first job at 14 was at a movie theater, specifically so I could watch movies for free.
Yeah, that was my first job too. My first job was at a movie theater for the same reason. Yeah. I was like, well, I'm gonna get a job. I'm gonna get a job at the movie theaters. I got a job at a little movie theater in Orange, and then I got in trouble for stealing movie posters that were stored there. All right, another super chat from Not a Band Account. Also, still on the Picard. It seems the Federation are evil every season.
Well, there's nothing evil about the Federation this season so far, right?
Nope.
So if you're
other
talking
than the
about
fact that it's being run by spies.
Well, I mean, if the fact that the changelings have infiltrated Starfleet, there's that. I mean, if you're talking about Section 31, we can go all the way back to the beginning. Section 31's constantly doing things that are not Star Trek-like, I guess you could say. But that started in the Berman era.
But they've incorporated Section 31. This is another thing I hate about modern Star Trek. Section 31 was one guy.
Yes. Yeah.
And you never really knew was he working for Starfleet? I mean, they added to the mythology, coming up with like an Enterprise in Section 31, but it was so cool when it was just Sloan, you know, it was just William Sadler, and he would show up, and Bashir would wake up, and Sadler was just in his room, you know, and would walk out, and that was it. And what they did in Discovery was turn Section 31 into like the CIA. We've got membership cards and special uniforms. Now we have ships and bases and artificial
and everyone knows
intelligences.
about them.
Yeah, and everyone knows who they are. I mean, it was great because Bashir was like the only person who knew. And they should have, that again is a fundamental lack of understanding. You know, when you see that they've leaned into Section 31 and they've decided it was like the CIA. I'm like, that's a fundamental, because you know why? Because they didn't watch Deep Space Nine.
That's why. Yeah.
Right.
They didn't watch it.
Yeah.
And that's another funny thing about modern, the creators of modern Star Trek. They don't know Star Trek because they never watched it. And when they hire people, they look at a BuzzFeed article, the top 10 episodes of this show, and okay, I'll watch those. But I guarantee you, no one's going to sit down and watch. There are 178 episodes of TNG. There's 172 episodes of Deep Space Nine. You think if you got hired to write Star Trek, you're going to watch Deep Space Nine?
Right.
No.
I mean, you guys got to remember, like when J.J. Abrams took over the franchise, J.J., Damon Lindelof, and Alex Kurtzman had never watched Star Trek before. It was
only Bob Orci did.
Yeah, who was the Star Trek fan. And so now we've got a guy in charge of Star Trek who was never a Star Trek fan to begin with.
Right.
Nope. And J.J. Abrams, at every interview he did when the Star Trek 09 came out, he said, I was never a Star Trek fan.
Yeah, he was a Star Wars.
And that's the guy that, and if I was running a corporation that owned an IP, I would not hire a director who said I wasn't a fan. And there's always been that attitude, because even when they're making Deep Space Nine or Next Generation, like Ron Moore could not tell anybody he was a Star Trek fan. You know, he wrote The Bonding. That was his entree into Star Trek. It was a 3rd season episode. That was a spec script he wrote, but he couldn't let anyone know he was a Trek fan.
But you could also argue that the director of Wrath of Khan wasn't a Star Trek fan. But
but he immersed himself.
Right. And the thing about him is he was a great storyteller, and he was classically educated, came from a family of artists and musicians. Right. You know, he was already a novelist, and he'd made Time After Time. So he understood proper story structure.
Also, there was less franchise for you to immerse yourself in back then too.
Yeah, there was only the original series.
Right. From Craig Perks for $5. Slang cursing was such an irregular part of TNG that Data was unfamiliar with lots of it, illustrating that it wasn't widely used. Love the show, guys.
Do you guys remember
so much, Chris or Craig?
You guys remember Double Dumbass on You?
Yeah, I mean, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Your use of colorful metaphors since that's just the way they talk.
It's definitely different. I mean, you're right. I mean, you guys are not wrong. It's definitely after Star Trek, The Voyage Home, it's hard to argue that cursing in current Star Trek would make a lot of sense. I mean, that's a fair statement, I think.
Yeah, from Andre Benson for $5. I remember watching an episode of the first season of Discovery when they dropped the F-bomb for the first time and said, "Oh, we are definitely a new era." And that's true. I remember that too. I remember thinking, damn it, this is going to be rough. And I was right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Right now, I think Chris has to run. So we just want to say thank you, Chris, so much for giving us your time. And make sure that you guys get over to check out his show. He is over at Film Threat, and we'll put a link down below. He has really great stuff. He's covering day-to-day awesome stuff that's happening around the industry. Also, make sure you get out there to check out his documentary, Attack of the Dock, coming out. And we'll have information on how you can go see that if you're in Southern California and where it's coming out on video of demand. Chris, thank you again so much for coming. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris. Huge fan, my friend.
Appreciate it. Shane, Brian, salty nerd. Thank you so much. Rob, always good to hang out with you, dude.
Good to hang out with you too, man.
It's been going on for decades now. Crazy. All right,
Awesome.
Take care, gentlemen. I'll talk to you
Chris.
soon.
All right, take care, Chris.
Bye-bye.
So we have some Picard, a lot of Picard extra super chats that I want to talk about real quick. If you guys got,
yes, we need to talk some Picard because episode 9 coming up.
Yeah. So the first one, and here's the deal: if you guys do a super chat asking for a spoiler or mentioning a spoiler, you're gonna get this response from me probably, because we can't give you a spoiler. You don't really actually want it, right? Or at least most people watching do not. From Aaron Casto, you don't have to answer this, but I heard Riker say, We need to get off the Titan. I'm willing to bet that we are going to see the Galaxy X soon.
Galaxy 10.
We don't know. We don't know anything about that. But
I mean, what can we really say? So, I mean,
you
right.
did say that. He did say that.
Yeah, but that's an old thing, right? I mean, wouldn't we see maybe the E? We've seen the Enterprise F in the trailers.
Right. Well, what we
Star
can
Trek
say,
Online.
That's true. What we can say is, look, there's people who gave it away in the beginning of the season. I mean, if you're, what did LeVar Burton say a long time ago? That we're going to see something we're familiar with. It's coming. So that's been public knowledge, and we've got 2 episodes left. So you guys can put 2 and 2 together. We're not going to spoil that for you, but the news is already out there. Something's coming. And so your instincts are right.
Who knows?
Right. I don't want to say what it is.
I think it's clearly the Excelsior, obviously, because that's where all the TNG people would go to, right? The Excelsior ship.
We need
the
the
old
Farragut.
one that Sulu drove.
The Farragut would be better.
All right. We got another switch. Not a band account said respectfully disagree on torture. The reason the U.S. avoided it for so long was the inefficiency. Instead of the captive says what they think is wanted. Technically, that's part of the Geneva Conventions. I don't believe the U.S. I think the U.S. avoids it on paper.
Yeah.
I don't believe the U.S. is actually avoiding anything.
There's a place called Guantanamo Bay where there's things happening there, or at least there used to be.
There's an entire place dedicated to tortures. I don't know.
People say torture doesn't work up to a point because eventually, you get numb to it, and there's only so much pain people can endure. But torture works.
It's funny how Rob just said that. So matter of fact, it's almost like you said that with firsthand knowledge.
No. I'm just.
You're like, but trust me.
I mean, we have all seen the sequel trilogy to Star Wars, so we know a thing or two about torture.
That's true.
It does work.
From Jeet Sivanathan. Did I say that right?
No, but that was a good try. Thanks, Geet.
Thank you, Geet. Damn it, Geet. If Academy was 25th century and got the Mike Mahan irreverent lower decks, but still Starfleet, love you guys. Yeah, that would be cool. If you put it in the 21st century and you had like the showrunners from Lower Decks or the writers from Lower Decks running it, and it was like a fun thing. Still, I still want my regular 25th century legacy Trek.
But you know what? The thing about Star Trek is that like you're out there in space exploring places. A Star Trek show where you're like, bound to like a planet or an academy or something like that. That doesn't sound like Trek to me. That just sounds boring.
Yeah,
at least
you could
say, at least you could say DS9. At least that was in a space station,
Well, and it's funny because Next Generation already did like in the first season coming of age when Wesley's taking the entrance exam to get into Starfleet, and then you've got the 5th season episode, The First Duty, which is a great episode of Star Trek, great episode of TNG, when you've got Nick Locarno, Robert Duncan McNeil's introduced, and there's the accident happens and they go back to Starfleet Academy to uncover the truth. That's a great episode too. But why, if a show's called Star Trek, why would you want to see Starfleet Academy people? You're going to be waiting for them to go make it. And I think one of the problems that I have with what they're doing with Star Trek is they're just using the Star Trek brand and trying to make it ubiquitous. If you want to do a workplace comedy, we can do Lower Decks. If you want to do a show about kids or outcasts or misfits or renegades or runaways, do Prodigy. And I think they're diluting the core brand of what Star Trek is.
Right.
And I think what's really interesting is that part of my fandom was getting things like the blueprints and the Franz Joseph technical manual and read. And there was so much fan produced. I mean, people forget between fanzines, fan produced blueprints. Why did Star Trek elicit all of that secondary market or whatever fan created material that people wanted desperately to make it canonical or as canonical as possible? Why did Star Trek have that effect on people? It's because people love the universe. They love the characters of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and they love that. But Star Trek was the first show that basically came along and said, even though you're watching the adventures of the Enterprise, there's a big bad universe out there. There's more Constitution class ships out there.
Right.
There's all this other stuff going on. So to watch Star Trek you knew that the 23rd century depicted on the show had a much bigger component to it than we just saw a small sliver. Star Wars was kind of the same thing. There was, when Star Wars first came out, you realized it was this gigantic universe where all this stuff was going on. And to be a fan of something is to know that, wow, there's all this other stuff happening that I'll never get to see.
Yeah.
And it's part of why you become a fan, because this living, breathing universe feels like a real place.
It's the
I
potential.
mean, my worst fear is that this is going to be like Riverdale in space, basically.
Yeah,
No, guys, it is.
Right.
I mean, listen, let's be honest, okay? It's Discovery. Look, and I'm not going to say it's going to be bad right off I mean, there's not a good track record leading up to what Discovery's brought us, but the intention is Alex Kurtzman's a co-showrunner, okay? And the intention is, I'm telling you right now, to replace the Discovery audience with. So if you're a fan of Discovery, you're probably going to love this show. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just give me 25th century Star Trek Legacy with Terry Matalas as showrunner, please.
Yeah. That would be nice.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Star Trek is, with all of these other entertainment franchises, you look at something like House of the Dragon. And House of the Dragon is a very sophisticated, very adult show. I would love to see I would like to see a Star Trek show approached with the elegance and intelligence and forward-thinking kind of entertainment that we get from shows like Succession or House of the Dragon. Or I want to see a really serious, forward-thinking Star Trek series that I mean, Next Generation, Picard season 3 is along those lines, but it's still really, it's pulpy and it's Star Trek. It's TNG. But what if we got a really serious-minded, wildly entertaining, but a show that was so compelling you couldn't wait for the next episode to show up? And when I say House of the Dragon, I don't mean exactly like House of the Dragon, but a bunch of a politically minded show that feels very adult in its conception in terms of it's made for a certain level of sophistication.
Do you think that can be accomplished with and also stay true to Star Trek and its roots?
I think it can, because I've seen it in Star Trek novels. Reading certain Star Trek novels that the Reeve Stevens wrote, Star Trek Prime Directive, meaning one of right off the top of my head, or Federation. Those two novels, both written by the Reeve Stevens, they made Star Trek in book form because we all, as a kid growing up, I took Star Trek very seriously. To me, it was a very serious, very adult, and it had all these forward-thinking concepts that blew my mind as a kid. Now, since 2009, I feel Star Trek has been dumbed down. And certainly the depiction of Spock in the Star Trek 09 movie is unconscionable. It's really, and no offense to Zachary Quinto, the way the character of Spock is written is such a bastardization of the character of Spock that it's actually offensive to me.
All right. So from Christopher Mays of $4.99, the concept of a Starfleet Academy show could work if it's done by Terry. Do we have any faith that it will be done well? Not much.
Right now, I don't have a lot of confidence. I would say that it's going to be done well, but I try to go into everything with a blank slate. Right? That's kind of the way we approach it. Look, you got something to prove because there's a track record of not great. Right? If it's going to continue on post Star Trek Discovery, that sends some messages. And right now, I'm not convinced that anybody outside of Terry Matalas can do really great Star Trek, because we haven't gotten really great Star Trek without him yet. So, prove it. That's what I say.
Thank you. That's true. From Jessica Tennis for $2. Will Worf become a Dahar master? He should. I think he already is. Damn it.
Good. Thank you.
Dahar master is like a legendary status among Klingons, right, Rob?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and maybe he was. Maybe he's. They just don't know it yet. We don't know.
Yeah, maybe we don't know.
I was going to say something else. I mean, the real frustrating thing about, I think about modern Star Trek is they keep pushing these ideas. Like, why are they so bent on making a Section 31 show? Like, that's something they've been talking about for a long time. And Starfleet Academy, why those things? Why are they?
Why?
Like, what about a Section 31 show is appealing? I don't understand. So you can make a spy show with a Star Trek name.
Yeah, you're trying to figure out what like the business reason is. Like, and this is a great super chat to bring up because these are all Kurtzman babies, right? These are things that Kurtzman wants. Strange New Worlds was not a Kurtzman thing. He responded to the petition, to the overwhelming cry out to create Strange New Worlds. But these Section 31 and Starfleet Academy, he's been talking about these for 8 years.
Yeah.
So not a banned account asks respectfully, does Kurtzman hate old fans? What was the purpose behind these shows?
No, he doesn't hate old fans. He doesn't hate old fans. He doesn't understand old fans. He's not an old fan. He doesn't really care. He got a whole bunch of money to make Star Trek, and he wants to make whatever is going to bring the most people in, and he doesn't understand. I mean, he doesn't hate fans. He doesn't care, I think. What do you think, Rob?
I don't think he hates fans either. This is the thing. Star Trek is a concept that was born out of the Camelot White House of the 60s. What John F. Kennedy represented, the space program, going to the moon. I think that Star Trek as a concept is from a different time. And what they need to do, what they haven't figured out how to do effectively, is how do you make modern Star Trek for today and make it relevant? Like, Star Trek is a storytelling framework. And now what they're trying to do is take an old framework and impose modernity on it, when they really should be changing the framework of what Star Trek is. And I would say that like, I advocated doing a full-on, when they first started doing this, I wrote it on my Tumblr. It's the only thing I ever wrote on my Tumblr, that they should reboot Star Trek from the beginning. They've got all the things they need. You've got all the characters, you've got the universe, but reboot it so you're free of continuity like they want it to be, but start over, because the conception of Star Trek is still clinging to things that were created with what humanity knew about itself in the 1960s.
Did they know, though, that rebooting it would be the straw that breaks the camel back for legacy fans? Like, if you reboot it, there's a good chance that the old fans just don't come back for it at all.
But I think then you have to make it good. I used to listen to people talk about how can they reboot Battlestar Galactica, and I'm like, first of all, Battlestar Galactica wasn't that good in the first place, but two, what they did with Battlestar Galactica, they gave you a whole different approach, a far more adult approach. They leaned into modern storytelling techniques, and they were able to tell some really adult-minded stories, and yet they still delivered a wacky science fiction show with killer robots and giant spaceships, and they were able to do that. And I think that with Star Trek, it would really be like, I love canonical Star Trek. I do.
Right.
I can't look at Discovery. Nothing about Discovery. They never made any attempt to make it canonical, especially when Kurtzman took over from Brian Fuller.
Yeah,
I mean,
parts of it are completely, to this day, I can't figure it out. Like the Klingon War, like there's parts of it that just don't make any sense. It's almost like
the burn,
like it almost has to exist in an alternative timeline for this.
Those ideas also are just so stupid that when they explain this one kid as his DNA got corrupted by I mean, you're like, who writes that?
That's really stupid. Yeah.
I mean, it's
like the idea of somebody who doesn't understand Star Trek trying to write Star Trek. Like they don't get it. Maybe they heard, dilithium. That's a great word. Throw that in there.
Well, how about this? They think dilithium is what you need to travel through space. No, it's one thing you can use.
To travel. And the whole thing about the micellular network.
Right.
Like, where is there a micellular network in space-time? And if you're traveling
that's like
on
a mushroom thing, right?
How can you pick up a giant tardigrade or whatever? I mean, these kinds of ideas were in the original conception of the show, but the whole thing about the micellular network was originally written to terraform. It was all about terraforming, not about traveling through space. And somebody's like, what if it's like folding space in Dune? Right. Like, I'm sure some writer said that in the writer's room. They're like, yeah, because they had the outlines that everyone had written.
I read Metal and Angles. What about a tesseract?
Yeah, I mean, it's all that way, and nobody ever stopped to think. Like, if you were to tell the writing room of Discovery, well, that like the Romulan D'Deridex warbirds were powered by artificial singularity.
Right.
That's how they were able to travel through warp, and they would have looked at you like, "What?"
Yep.
Well,
Right.
what
yeah.
about this?
So
We didn't have the lithium on Earth, yet we still created a warp capable ship with Cochrane, and that's what got us noticed by the Vulcans. How did he do it?
Well, yeah, I mean, dilithium was just another way to channel that energy. Dilithium was a mineral that was ideal to channel that kind of
It
energy.
just made it more efficient, right?
Yeah, and it's but they don't understand that. And that's kind of, those are the things. Like, I used to be really nitpicky, but then I changed and was like, okay, there's overarching concepts with Star Trek, and as long as if there's a fealty to those overarching, like for instance, the transporter is a line of sight device.
Oh,
you have to be like, if you're in orbit around a planet, the transporter only has a certain distance, but it's got to be line of sight. You've got to know exactly where you're beaming down.
Yep, got to have coordinates.
The coordinates, you have to all understand all that. I think, and the thing that made it, sometimes we saw in the first season early on, if there was a problem, an ion storm, you could either get split into two, wind up in a mirror universe. The transporter was an iffy thing.
Yeah,
by the time we get to Star Trek Into Darkness, somebody in their one-man fighter can beam from inside of their one-man fighter to the Klingon homeworld. That's literally what happens. And in Star Trek 09, again, you're beaming from a planet onto a ship at warp.
Well,
how can you? When a
they
ship,
they did try to address that, I think.
They tried to address it, but they also were beaming people from moving ships to other moving ships.
Well, first of all, how could you possibly beam onto a ship? I mean, sometimes they're like, well, we're matching a ship. Okay, I'll buy into that. But on Star Trek 09, they're on Delta Vega.
Yeah.
Which they could apparently see Vulcan explode from. And they're on Delta Vega and they're beaming onto the Enterprise. How would you ever possibly be able to beam onto a ship that's at warp? That's going,
that's tough
because it's constantly moving. There's no place you could never get a coordinate to beam onto.
Right.
Because
you're right.
Moving.
And
so
the Discovery season 1 did the same thing.
Yeah, and you're like, you've taken, what you've done is you've now taken a device that was once believable and turned it into a magic machine.
Right.
So and these were rules that were established in the first season of Star Trek, in the first episodes. And when you watch, it's like, okay, like Superman's powers. Superman has defined powers. If in Superman 2 he tears off a cellophane S, which he does, and he throws it at one of the Kryptonian villains, you're like, what is that?
He does. He did that.
Superman's powers are not derived from technology. They're derived from the fact that his body processes the energy from our yellow sun differently.
Right.
It's actually super simple the way he works. Like, there's no reason to change it. It's really easy to understand.
And that's why when I watch these things, that's part of the reason I can't watch J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. They're so full of the dumb that I can't, again, in Star Trek 09, you're Nero. You've traveled back through time. You're confronting a Federation ship that's at least 100 years old. You beam Captain Rabaul over there, and you're like, "Yo, man, do you know where Admiral Spock is?" Captain Rabaul's like, "I don't even know who this person is." "Oh, I'm going to get mad and skewer you." Yeah. And you look at something like that, it's like, what? He announces himself.
So you must love the Fast and Furious movies.
Well, I do. No, I love Fast 5. I love Tokyo Drift.
They're not breaking canon, Brian. We're good.
And no,
they break their own canon all the time. But I think
they've gotten more and more. They've got more and more ridiculous. But
there's time travel in the newest movie, by the way.
No.
Yeah, there is. Sorry. Go ahead.
But there is. But in Star Trek 09, when Nero does that, here's a guy that can provide him. He gets mad at him because he doesn't know where Spock is. That would be like, I think I said this last week or something. If somebody asked me, do you know where this person is in New York City? I'm like, one, I don't know them, and I live in LA. And they get mad at me and run me through with a pipe.
They stab you.
I mean, that's like, man? I'm in the far reaches of space, and you're asking me if I know this one Vulcan, and I tell you I don't.
And then they chill out for like 30 years before they start enacting their revenge plot.
Right. Well, in the deleted scenes, you find out they're captured by the Klingons after the Kelvin rams the ship, and they were in a Klingon prison for 25 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why didn't they show that part? I don't know, but they should have shown that. Then.
Well,
That
it's
would've made more sense.
just like Kirk seduces an Orion cadet, the hot green girl, and she's the one that reprograms the Kobayashi Maru. And and they cut that. It's on the disc. You can watch the deleted scene, and you're like, wow, if there was ever a reading of the Kobayashi Maru that was not understood, like these guys, when you watch that movie, you realize that they have no understanding of what the Kobayashi Maru is. J.J. Abrams certainly doesn't. Watching how Chris Pine is playing that scene.
Yeah, the point behind Kirk doing it specifically was to show that he was doing things so differently than everyone else. Go ahead.
They had Spock write the Kobayashi Maru sequence. That was Spock's brainchild.
Right.
Yeah.
That was dumb too.
The way I always envisioned it is that when Kirk rescues the ship in the Kobayashi Maru sequence in Star Trek II, what they're referring to is that the professor's like, wait a minute, how the hell did that happen? That's not supposed to happen. And Kirk used some tactic that maybe he took from Garth of Izar or something, and he was able to rescue the ship. And the professors are stunned. Right. And it only after investigation did they find out that he reprogrammed the simulator, because no one had ever thought to do what he was going to do.
Right.
No one ever used that
he doesn't
tactic.
believe in no-win situations. Right?
Yeah, and he'd gone back into Starfleet history and found out some obscure battle tactic that existed that no one had ever thought of before, and because he was described as being he was a stack of books on legs. That's what Finnegan called him.
You mean he wasn't lounging in the captain's chair eating an apple?
Yeah, no.
Giving orders.
Yeah, no. I mean, that was, and then it's so funny when you look at that, clearly he's cheating. And the whole point was that if he had done the Kobayashi Maru test, if they'd done it correctly, if J.J. Abrams even had the slightest understanding of what that test should be, the professor should be stunned. And Spock would have been sitting there going, fascinating. That Kirk was able to defeat the test.
Not getting angry. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And 200-watt studio for $5. Kurtzman does a remake. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish that.
No, I'm good. I was good. No.
Kurtzman does a remake of The Right Stuff, but it ends before they go into space. It ends when they graduate the astronaut training. That's what Starfleet Academy is like. Right before anyone actually goes to do anything special, that's when the next season of cadets come in.
I don't know. Yeah, it's yet to be determined what's going to happen. I mean, I figured that you're going to have the Wesley Crusher story where there's cadets on trial. I'm sure they're going to do that. You're going to have a lot of, I think one time they talked about it almost like being a legal drama, the way Starfleet Academy would be.
Isn't the main character of this Power of Math Tilly? Isn't she the one who's kind of spearheading everything?
I would assume she's going to be a part of it.
I like science.
The thing is, you go back. I took a clip from the movie The Paper Chase from the 70s with John Houseman as this professor, and it's a famous legal drama. They turned it into a TV series. If they made it like that, if they made it like a Dead Poets Society, or made it like Good Will Hunting, when you had a professor like Robin Williams, and made it, or it had the feel of a Friday Night Lights. I've always said I love the TV series Friday Night Lights. That's, if you had to make a series, it's the East Texas football Star Trek. That's what I've called it. The morality and the humanity of Friday Night Lights, and Coach Taylor and his wife, they're like Kirk and Spock. That's what I love that show. And I've always thought The West Wing was a Star Trek show, just like Master and Commander is like a Star Trek movie. And if they could do a show they won't. They'll lean into like they said, when you read the description, first loves and first rivalries and all this, I'm just like, man.
Yeah, if it's going to be that, then it's not going to be good for a lot of legacy fans. I mean, let's just face it. If we don't want a teen drama, we don't. Maybe other people do, but it's kind of what's probably coming.
From Mikey Lito for $5. What's exasperating about Picard season 3? The pre-episode Strange New World commercial.
Mikey is so right.
The difference, the chummy Strange New World crew and the professional Titan crew is night and day. That's true. I gotta be honest though, whenever I watch Paramount Plus and I pay for no commercials, I hate that I am physically forced to sit there through a commercial for something that I'm not trying to watch. It drives me nuts.
What's funny about that commercial? I'm right there with Mikey, because in that commercial, someone says, "What's the mission?" And Pike's like, "We'll explore," as if we don't know this.
Right.
And then
it's to cook something.
And then Spock says something, and then somebody turns and goes, "Can you put that in English?" You know, and it's like, okay, everything I hate about Star Trek Strange New Worlds is in that commercial.
You
know,
mean
I look at this,
Khan's niece asked him.
yeah, Khan's niece says, yeah, and it's Leon or whatever. Again, who thought that was what an Alex Kurtzman thing? Yeah, what if she's like related to Khan Noonien Singh? And come on, man.
All they need is a clip from Aliens 3 to complete that entire, you know, for the Gorn, of course, because they weren't actually Gorn. But
Oh my God, Shane hates the Gorn episode.
Pisses me off so much,
dude. That's a world breaking episode.
That's a Kiva Goldsman through and through, man.
That was offensive. They take a proud spacefaring race that had better technology than the Federation and turn them into that.
Right.
Although we never saw an adult Gorn.
No, get off of that. It's not true.
I'm just saying. You know where they're going. I'm playing devil's advocate here. Ready?
Okay, let me ask you this: the Gorns that we did see, how do they go from that to being a spacefaring, technologically advanced race?
Yes. When they become adults, they have more intelligence.
I'm just pissed they did him or dirty.
Oh, that was realistically they kill the blind guy.
The most offensive part of that episode was not the Gorn for me. It was killing the only character I actually wanted to see.
And who's disabled? Kill the disabled. Kill the gimp.
Yeah.
And I love Carol Kane, but we needed more Hemmer. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
That was the one great character that they had created for that show.
Such a great character, yeah. From Craig Perks I'm sorry, one more thing. He died in the snow. Like his race
That's where
was
he's from.
born in sub-freezing temperatures, and the Gorn can't hatch in sub-freezing temperature. Hello? You have the answer right there. Just go walk out in the snow for 10 minutes.
How about just use the transporter and make sure that the Gorn is not inside him when he rematerializes?
Yeah.
So there's so many ways you could have solved this problem that anyways. No, it's better for him to jump off the cliff.
You would just beam the thing out of him. You know, I mean,
but he can just go, Rob. He can just go walk out in the snow and hang out for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
they established in the beginning of the episode the way the other people survived were because it was too cold on the planet. I mean, okay, he's an Aenor. He was born in sub-freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
Okay,
this is why I hate modern Star Trek.
That part drove me. I remember we did that review and it was like 3 hours long. I had to cut it down to 30 minutes because half it was me just yelling this exact fact over and over again.
But it's just frustrating that sitting in an edit bay, they don't ask themselves these questions. Like we've seen the Gorn in the original series, we saw the Gorn in Enterprise and in the animated series too. But so if you think that, okay, here's the Gorns have always been part of this proud spacefaring race that once we were first introduced to them, it turns out that we were the ones that invaded their territory, or at least that's what Kirk comes to believe. And it's true. So then you turn them into just generic alien ripoff monsters.
Right.
Why would you, I mean, talk about othering or turning into, like, just because they look like lizards. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like the most reductive, racist shit ever. where you take a Star Trek race, and because of the way they look, you turn them into evil villains, creatures, something to it's the most antithetical thing to Star Trek I can possibly imagine.
Well, and the reasoning behind it is what breaks my heart. Is that they basically said that, well, Kirk may not have been seeing a real Gorn. It was just an image of what he might think a Gorn would look like. And I'm like, where the hell does this come from that they decide this?
And by the way, that's not true because we saw a Gorn in Enterprise. Of course, they haven't watched Enterprise, so they don't know that there was a Gorn in Enterprise.
Right. Yeah.
And there's also a Gorn skeleton in Lorca's Ready Room.
Yeah.
In Discovery.
The thing is, they just don't know.
This is a sentient species. And
I mean, Memory Alpha is your friend, man. I'll just go there. Just go it's on the web. Just go.
True.
Just go to Google.
Yep, I got it bookmarked. Craig Perks. What Star Trek needs is a head showrunner who understands it. Terry did, and he produced a series of Trek that is like a hug in a mug. True. Trek is an idealized version of humanity. Trek equals, I don't know what this means. Trek equals Star Wars? I agree with everything you said except that last part for some reason.
No, Star Trek is greater than Star Wars.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, in my opinion, it is too. But that's a fighting word for some people.
Yeah, we've been saying the same thing. We want. I mean, listen. I mean, anybody with eyes can tell that Terry knows how to make a damn TV show. I mean, you go back to 12 Monkeys. Whoever gets him next, they're going to be so fortunate. And Paramount's going to kick themselves if they let him go. And this thing ends up going off the going into the deep. So yeah. I agree with you, Craig, here. I think we need somebody. Rob said it earlier. You need some. Rob, why don't they have somebody to manage Star Trek? I don't get it. I mean, it's not that complicated.
Well,
it costs that much money.
Alex Kurtzman is managing it.
Right. But they know he's not. I mean, he's obviously not. I mean, isn't it obvious to everybody that it's not what it could be?
Paramount should have a Star Trek executive.
Right.
That knows Star Trek back and forth. The problem is, nobody who knows Star Trek back and forth would ever be the kind of person that could be in a studio space, and people would look at you like you were insane.
That's what it is.
There's no the mouth breathing Saturday Night Live Star Trek fans. Did that mirror have a foal? I mean, all that. That's what it would be, and there isn't anybody. John Van Citters, who's now the brand manager, or he runs the brand, he was in licensing and kind of oversaw Star Trek licensing. I mean, he could do it, but he's not used to interacting with creatives who are actually making television and movies. Yeah. But that's what they need. Star Trek needs.
How about just an executive that understands basic fundamentals of storytelling? Where you could say, hey, there weren't any holograms in the original series. Don't put them on the ship in the new series.
Yeah. You know what we should do? Let's make an AI like a ChatGPT / Star Trek and just have it run the entire franchise.
No,
problem solved. You don't got to pay it, but at least it knows the canon.
I'll do it. You guys just call me. I'll go sit down there. I'll do it for half price just to save Star Trek. I don't even care about the money.
Someone who says, no, that's not Spock's sister. Come up with a better idea.
I'll do it for free Red Bull. That's not Spock's sister. Why is there holograms? Why are the nacelles detached from the ship? How does that make any sense?
Okay. You've been on that one for a while, buddy.
But that is such a dumb.
Yeah,
I mean,
the dumbest thing ever. That's why.
It's so dumb. Yeah. Like, it's so monumentally stupid. I don't care what their excuse is.
So much could go wrong.
That doesn't just break Star Trek canon. That breaks the laws of physics in every way. That breaks like universal laws of momentum. It needs to be attached to the thing it's driving.
Well, yeah, and also, like, one of the great things about Star Trek is starships. And you fundamentally do something that's really stupid. I mean, the design of starships in the 31st century that they've come up with, terrible. Just awful, awful, awful designs.
Yeah, one EMP just knocks out your entire fleet.
You guys want to know the truth about Star Trek? Let me tell you the truth about Star Trek. Let me tell you the real truth, okay? I'm not going to mention any names. First thing I want to say is there are hundreds of really hardworking men and women making these TV shows that we don't like, and they're working their butts off, and they're not making the decision of who's acting in it, what the story is. They're doing the sets, the graphics.
Oh, I just want to clear something up.
Yeah,
the hardworking people, we like them. You said all these hundreds of people that we don't like. No.
I'm sorry. Yes, we like them. Yeah,
I think this is a great point to make. I just want to clarify what you said.
So for sure, what I want to say is that those people are doing their job. They're out there just trying to follow through with whatever the showrunners and the writers create and what they make. They're hardworking people. Okay. This is not about them at all. Okay. The problem is that in this, what we've done going forward is that we've had well, you threw me off, Rob. So what was it we were talking about a minute ago?
You were talking about all the hardworking people.
Just before that though, what was the,
well, I was saying that I think the point you're trying to make is, all of the great people that are working on these shows, it's not their fault.
Right. Yeah.
It's the people at the top, it's the writers. And look, and here I'll even go even further. All the people that are working on Star Trek are trying to do the best work they can. No one is trying to make bad TV. The problem is they're hiring people that don't know science fiction as a genre. They're not, I mean, Star Trek is after all science fiction. And to me, you have to have like if you want to be a philosopher, there's a basic canon of philosophical works and philosophers you need to know before you can become a philosopher. because there's been philosophers for thousands of years, and there's been a lot of important texts that a philosopher should know, because all other philosophies are built upon these texts. So you're not gonna get a master's degree or a PhD in philosophy without having a working knowledge of all these other philosophers. I would say that if you're going to work on a show on any IP, whether it's The Predator, whether it's Alien, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's Star Wars, there is an underlying canon of work that you need to have seen and understand before you carry forth to work in that IP.
Right.
The problem is there's too much of the IP for people to do that. And if you were working on, This Was Us or The Last of Us or whatever the hell you were working on before you got hired to work on Star Trek, people are hiring you because you worked in television. So you were working on Vampire Diaries, or you were working on the reboot of 90210, or you were working on Riverdale, but now you just got hired to work on Star Trek. That's the problem, is because the people that work on Star Trek are all generic television writers. They write the Star Trek Discovery is a show where you listen to the way people talk. They just talk like they're on any other show. The relationship drama, when characters are talking to one another about their feelings, you could transpose that to any other network show, and it's not special to Star Trek. No one talks like when you watch that ad that Mikey Lito pointed out, that Strange New Worlds ad that's before Picard, that doesn't feel, that's generic. That's just generic writing. What's the mission? To explore, as if that's some like really
groundbreaking thing.
That's what you want to convey to us, and it's all generic, low rent, lowest common denominator, action adventure. It's a cool sci-fi show. And the funny thing,
someone cut from that line to him cooking.
Yeah. You also have to remember that so like in modern writers' rooms, right? The showrunner will get a script. It could be the most brilliant script in the world. Then they'll go through and rewrite it to put their stamp on it. So the showrunner plays a very important role in how good the scripts are.
Yep.
So if you have a crappy showrunner, like we had for seasons 1 and 2 of Picard, you're going to have a crappy show, no matter how good the writers are and what they're turning in.
Well, yeah, you need,
they're following the lead.
We've had Christopher Monfett on this show. You've had Matt Okamura on this show talking about how the writing went and how Terry was involved with every aspect of the show, not just the scripts, but also with Dave Blast, the production designer. And he was out there getting Dan Curry to make the Kurleth that Worf carries now, a new Klingon weapon. I mean, he did all these things because he knows Star Trek. Terry Matalas knows Star Trek. And, I didn't even know Terry Matalas a year ago. I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't know him.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, and having met him, he's just a lovely guy.
Yeah. But compare him to Michael Chabon, right? A Pulitzer Prize winning novelist
but he wasn't a showrunner.
Came up with space flowers and pulling eyeballs out of people's eye sockets. And,
I mean, and plus he'd never shown it.
Like a coven of witches who hit themselves in the head with rocks.
What happened in Michael Chabon's defense, he had just played Mass Effect. And it was really that narrative was in his mind when he was writing. That's it.
But my point is that like you have this guy who obviously knows how to tell a story, and yet he delivers one of the worst seasons of Star Trek ever made. And you're like, what happened there?
Well, he knows how to write a book, but he doesn't know how to make a show.
Well, but the thing is like you can translate that, right? If you have basic storytelling fundamentals straight in your head, you can craft a season of television which is good. It just so happens that he didn't, and I wonder like how much of that was like Kurtzman's influences.
No, I would argue that there's more to show running. I would argue there's more to show running than just writing a good story. And it's been demonstrated by a lot of the people who work with Terry. What I'm saying is like
if you're a good novelist, you know how to write good TV. Like the fundamentals of fiction storytelling.
Right. But what you can afford to put on screen. But what you can afford to put on screen. So you can write anything you want in a book. But you know that what you can actually film and what you can actually do are not always the same thing.
Picard season 1 had like what $100 million to play with.
But
I'm just saying, like
I would say this, like, okay, in Picard season 1, the Romulans they've captured a Borg cube that are full of thousands of drones, right? That could be the entire season of a show. Like, who captured that cube? How did they capture that cube? I would think that on a Borg cube, you would find species of aliens that we've never seen before because they came from the Delta Quadrant through transwarp conduits.
Right.
I mean, who administered that facility? You know, I had so many questions about this Borg cube that was captured, and all these scientists are doing this research.
Or at the very least, what happened to Narek at the end of the season?
The
guy just fucked off, like no resolution.
Yeah, no resolution. But then they just, at one point, they just dump all of these poor drones that are on the cube. They just dump them into space. And I'm like, we've seen since Best of Both Worlds Part 2 that people can be reclaimed. Drones can be reclaimed, and to be fair, they're reclaiming drones in that whole episode.
And Borg can exist in the vacuum of space. They don't need air or oxygen or anything like that.
Yeah, and it's like, why would you? I had so many questions about this that they had no intention of answering. It was maddening.
You know, it was worse the way they set it up. Like the trailer the week before was showing that Seven was about to become the Borg queen or whatever for that cube, and they set it up that way. Only it was like that same moment when they handed the lightsaber to Luke, and he's like, "Huh."
But I mean, as a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, how do you come up with, this planet's protected by space flowers?
It's funny, those were mechanical space flowers, like they were launched. You know, these people. What? And it's just.
What about like the whole thing with like Data's positronic molecule that like they could
that was really bad.
They
got all of data from one molecule. That makes no sense.
It doesn't really. I mean, they're just making. See, that's another thing. Like, you have to extrapolate in science fiction. It's very important to, when you're world building. All the great science fiction writers, whenever they come up with propulsion systems or transporters, they have to make it believable. You know, and if they give you enough of a background, like the transporter. You know, that they came up with that because it would be too difficult to have a shuttlecraft in every episode fly out of the Enterprise and land on a planet. That was too much. That would cost too much in terms of effects. So they had to figure out a way, from a production standpoint, how do we get our characters from the ship down to a planet? The transporter was an elegant, interesting way to do that. Well, once you have that idea, well, then the transporter, you've got to be in. It's got to be line of sight. You can't be on one side of a planet and beam them to the other side of the planet. That doesn't work. The transporter doesn't go that far. So then you have all these rules that go along with the transporter, and you can't use it during an ion storm because you might wind up in the mirror universe, and you can't use it during this kind of storm, or we might get split into two. You know, so they have those rules make you believe that the transporter can work. They give you enough detail that you're like, okay, I'll buy that. It's a big ask. Now everyone says, well, is it really you who appears on the other side of the transporter, or is it a copy of you, like the Prestige or something?
Right.
I get that. But you know what? In my mind, it's an exact duplicate. You're taken apart, you're put back together. It's actually you. In my mind, that's for whatever reason, the transporter, when people say, well, what if it, I'm like, look, Rick Deckard is a human being, and the transporter is able to pull you apart and put you back on the planet. Those are truisms in science fiction. I don't care if Ridley Scott says Rick Deckard's a replicant. He's wrong. Because if he's a replicant, Blade Runner doesn't work.
Right.
Good point. You know, that's
okay. Dustin Cole for $5.
Like, he is a replicant. Ridley Scott said he was.
Dustin Cole for $5. Please tell me the big bad in Jack's head isn't Borg. I love the Borg, but super overused, and there are so many other villains to pick.
And my response is fascinating. Because we can't answer that question.
We can't answer it, Dustin. But
you know, I can speculate. Like, what else could it be?
Oh yeah, you speculate. Go ahead.
Yes,
I mean, like,
yes. Matt can speculate.
Matt's here to save us. Go ahead.
Oh, thank God, Matt's here.
What else could it be? Because, like, basically, that was the real Picard that hooked up with Beverly. He had remnants of Locutus in him. Who knows, like, you know, what, you know, even though Picard was reclaimed, who knows what's left in there. So I can't think of anything other than the Borg STD that you know, infected Beverly and got passed on to the baby. So my guess is
that would be an interesting twist on Borg mythology too.
Yeah,
I would buy that.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's not the Borg, but I'm the cynic here, so like I'm gonna guess that it is.
You want to be Borg hot?
I'm just gonna spoil it right now. This is who it is. Ready? Tubix from Voyager. I've been telling you guys. Everyone thinks I'm just playing around. It's Tubix. You just wait and see.
Be funny if it was Jar Jar.
Or Armis from the guy, the mud monster that killed Tasha
No,
Yar?
Barkley. It's
Har.
Barkley.
Or it's Nagilum from the second season episode where
Or
Silence
Nagilum.
holds lease.
What was Nagilum? That was a Q or something, right? What was that thing?
Nagilum.
Okay.
Why does he have to be somebody else?
Another super chat. Thanks. I will take a look at the Daily Wire. Disappointed Amazon canceled Story Writer. Each studio should have a service like that.
Thank you, Jaleel.
We never got to take advantage of that. Here's a question from Matthew Hammond. Why do IP property holders not lean into the fan expectations instead of searching for a new audience? Create a new audience with a new series. That's a great question.
It's
Why
a gamble.
look for a new audience?
It's a gamble. Like, they're gambling that they're going to be able to keep the old audience and bring in a new audience. If they wanted to just create a new audience with a new series, then they wouldn't use old IPs, right?
And they also want to make more money with the old IP.
I see. So they're hoping that they get new people and that a healthy portion of the old fans stick around.
Yeah.
Well, that's capitalism. No Money G for $10. Thank you, No Money. Great show, guys. Hope to meet some of you in Vegas. Hashtag Terry Trek. Hashtag Star Trek Legacy.
Yes, I think you'll meet all of us in Vegas. I think we're all going to be there.
Most of us. And Joe Cronin from Star Trek Late Night. XOXO. He's actually physically reaching out to kiss and hug you, Rob. That's what that means.
Is that what it means?
That's what it means. You didn't know that. That's what that means.
Thank you,
Well,
Joe.
I know Joe. That's what he meant.
Idic, that's fine. I'll kiss and hug him back.
Joe's having a bad day.
Mom,
Have a
dude.
better day, Joe.
Oh, is everything wrong? Okay with Joe?
Yeah, he's okay, but he's having a bad day. Good.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. I love you, man. Dino's reviews. Cadets make up most of the crew in Star Trek 2.
It's true.
Very true.
It's accurate.
Yeah,
Look how
the whole
that turned
show
out
starts
for
out
him.
that way.
Same
Didn't
thing
turn
with
out good.
Generations.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Strange New Worlds killed the literal old white man.
Michael Nemo. Thanks. That's funny. He's talking about Hammer.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
you're right.
That's great.
Oh my God.
I don't think they were going for that, but yes.
No. Actually, it was more like they hated blind people. That's clearly what it really meant.
The guy, it's so crazy. The guy literally is blind, like for real. Like how many
He's an
roles?
actual.
They said, don't worry, we're going to have him back in the Star Trek universe in some way. I'm like, why? You got the perfect role for him. Why kill him here?
Yeah, you had the perfect role for a guy who was an actual Star Trek fan. Stoked he finally and he played it well, really well. Anyway,
and he's blind. Yep.
From Foxhound, go woke, go broke. Matter of time for Disney. I don't think so. I don't think that they. I think they're too big to fail.
Well, they might go broke for a while though, and hopefully enough to shake him up and to get him back and doing the right thing.
Perhaps. Yeah, but I don't think that. Yeah, but they ain't going anywhere. They're too big.
I just hope their investor calls go more like the one that they just had.
Oh
that
my
investor
God.
call was so brilliant. That was fun. That
Wow.
was actually entertaining. Did you guys watch that?
Yeah.
All right. G4. I missed this one earlier. G4. I missed Sci-Fi Channel from around 1995 or Trio from around the same year. Yeah, the Sci-Fi Channel before it was Sci-Fi.
Yeah.
Oh my God. When it was Sci-Fi, it was my favorite. The only reason I actually paid for cable was for Attack of the Show, was for G4 and the Sci-Fi Channel. Every other channel can go F off. And then all of a sudden it got changed to Sci-Fi. And then it was like the wrestling channel on Sci-Fi. And it was like all wrestling all the time with random 3 a.m. reruns of some Stargate or whatever. Oh, it was brutal. Brutal marketing, dude. I'm not sure why they did that.
I mean, that's when I was on the show Sci-Fi Vortex, SF Vortex. I was on that show a lot on their thing called The War Room. It was really fun.
Really?
I was on with Stan Lee, not
That's
just
awesome.
Mark DePay and ripping on Spawn, but we had a great time on that show. It was so much fun.
That's great. I
awesome.
guess I missed you on there. Ghost Rider for $5. Greetings, Rob. I can't wait to meet you in person in Vegas. Time permitting, I'd like to buy you a picture and tell you a story if you care. Listen.
Oh, you had me a pitcher.
Yeah. Always better than just a beer, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, pitcher means I'm there for the duration.
The Millennium Fandom Bar when we get to Vegas.
Yeah, we're all planning on being there. Just a heads up. We're all planning on being there. Although, if I don't make it there for some reason, don't get mad at me.
We won't be surprised. It's okay.
All right, come on. John, I love you all, but I have been to the last 4. Okay, it's not like I missed. John Kakaza, the tide is turning. We are winning. Stay vigilant. I don't know about that, but I hope that's true.
I mean, there's definitely things happening. I mean, look at all the movies that are not making money. At some point, it's going to have to shake up. I think coming out of COVID, a lot of things change. We become very internalized. But movies like Super Mario Brothers and things like this that are coming out, it does feel like there's like common sense is kind of waking up again.
Yeah, I mean, look at Top Gun Maverick. I think Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is going to be great.
I think so too.
I've only ever heard for the last year that The Flash is great. You know, and Andy Muschietti is I think a good
the new Flash
filmmaker.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's telling me it's good too.
People have been saying it's great for a year.
Yeah.
Even like I even hit up inside sources. I'm like so fascinated with this movie, and they're all the way like, yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, you hear Tom Cruise asked to see it, and he thought it was great.
Right. That was weird, right?
That was
like,
weird.
Why were they? It was almost like a weird marketing. Like, hey, listen, guys, Tom saw it. He thought it was great, and we're like, oh, okay. I guess.
You know, because the studio could probably send it to, or you can get a DCP of it, and they'll just send you a drive. He's probably got one of those huge, like Bryan Singer has an actual theatrical projector in his house.
That makes sense.
You can get a movie, plug in the DCP, and watch it.
To be Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise, man. Can you imagine?
Mr. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I hope that at CinemaCon they show Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Oh, I'm so jealous. You're going to be able to watch The Flash at CinemaCon.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get them to return my emails.
And they showed the villain is Vosh. Yeah, that's who they're talking to, Vosh.
Mr. ESQ for $5 says RMB equals legend.
I don't know about
legendary.
That.
Max Relax for $11. Excellent show. I'm sorry, what was that?
It's just because I'm old and it's attrition. I just haven't left. Still here.
He's not a legend. He just figured he couldn't find the exit, and so he just stayed.
Yeah. He just won't die, so we're good.
Yeah. Max Relax, excellent show with a good discussion and a solid panel. I'm new to this channel and just subbed. Looking forward to seeing more of this every Tuesday at 2, my friend. Come on.
Thanks,
back.
Max. Also, you can come on Thursdays at noon.
Monday at 2, Brian.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Thursdays at noon and Mondays at 2. Thank you.
Tuesdays are our live stream, okay, at the Salty Nerd Podcast.
That's right. And there's a Tuesday one. Yeah. And I think Rob has like 40 live streams
every day.
He's never off camera.
So just go to his channel. It's like 24 hours streaming. The only time he's not there is when he's here, apparently. From Whiskey Jack, why do I need peeps with EX? I can use Wikipedia.
Yeah.
All right, Jack. Wikipedia does have a lot of good info.
What does EX mean?
I don't know. An EX version of an action figure with moving eyes.
Give us a follow up on that, Whiskey Jack. You don't just throw it in the chat.
Yeah, this is a nice statement, and I agree. Somehow Palpatine returned. Ray Palpatine.
We avoided talking about this the whole day.
We actually made a video about how they could have made that movie correctly using what they had, and it was funny because the first time we put the video out, it was around the time the movie came out, and no one watched it. It was like we had like 10,000 views or whatever, and we heavily promoted it, and then we put it out again with more updated information like a year later, and boom, like 500,000 views. So
I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but there was an article in Yahoo News, I think it was yesterday, where they interviewed Kathleen Kennedy at Star Wars Celebration, and she basically doubled down on more female-centric Star Wars stuff, which is one of the reasons why they decided to bring Rey back. The Acolyte is going to be female-focused. Ahsoka's female-focused. Basically, she's just, green-lighting everything that, the first Jedi is going to be a woman, person of color. And
well, the problem
is that true?
The problem is that they don't know yet for sure. But the problem is the fact that you have to say we're doubling down on women is what is essentially the problem. Just double down on great characters.
Yeah.
But nobody liked Rey. Nobody but the third wave feminists liked Rey. Star Wars fans didn't like her. She was boring. She was a Mary Sue.
Well, that's what I'm telling you.
Nobody cared about her.
No, you're right.
Why bring her back?
Because that's what I'm saying. That's what's wrong with Disney. What's wrong with happening with Star Wars is it's more about It's not about what's good. It's about what message they're trying to
She's a
send.
better identity thief than she is a Jedi.
Well, listen, remember when The Force Awakens came out at the premiere, Kathleen Kennedy and a bunch of other people were wearing those shirts that said the Force is female.
But those are Nike shirts, remember?
Yeah.
Those were Nike. They were made by Nike.
Which makes, there you go.
But they weren't because they weren't Star. I just want to point out they weren't Star Wars official Star Wars merch.
I mean, but all the crew that made the movie were wearing them. But yeah, okay.
Let me tell you, there are amazing characters, women characters in film, amazing ones. I can go back and talk about whether it's Ellen Ripley from Alien. We've talked about it. There's a million great women characters. When you start forcing there to be more female characters that aren't written well, it actually hurts the feminine, more women better in
You also got to remember all these
women
women characters were written by old white men. So,
well, speaking of women, powerful women in Star Wars, from Michael Nemo for $2, anyone but me miss Gina Carano in Mando season 3.
I would have liked to have seen Favreau's original plan for those characters before she got booted.
Yeah,
I think that screwed up a lot of stuff that they had planned.
It's a shame that you can let the politics of the moment overshadow. I mean, even looking back, when you look back, and we're not going to talk a great deal about politics here, but if you look back at everything that happened during COVID and the things that people said that now are like, oh yeah, shit, that was right. And that's the sad part about it is like these people lost their jobs. They lost, over something that they said. We live in a world in a country where you should be able to say anything that you want.
Yeah, the thing Gina tweeted was ridiculous. So innocuous. It was dumb.
It was ridiculous.
She got so much hate for it.
Yeah,
it really was.
Yeah, that's politics.
We had from Jessica Tennis thoughts on the Rowan Coleman Trek retrospectives.
Oh, he's got a good channel. This is a YouTuber.
Oh yeah, I've watched some of those. They're good.
Yeah, he does a good job. Yeah,
Yep.
he's he does a lot of retrospectives. Yeah, check him out. He's
yeah, it's good.
He does a good job breaking down kind of, and he does more than Star Trek. He's done Battlestar Galactica and a bunch of other stuff too. He's good.
It's rad. Okay, yeah, go check it out. I haven't seen it. I'll check it out later. Beanie 2009 said for $10 says, I'd like to see a Star Trek anthology show featuring 2 to 3 episode arcs with crews of different races, time periods, etc. You can see a ship destroyed in one arc and a ship that finds them in another arc.
The problem with that is from a TV production standpoint, that gets prohibitively expensive because you have to build, like, the thing about Star Trek is you have your standing sets, you build your starship sets. So you always have the starship that you can be on. But if you're doing an anthology show and you have different sets every 3 episodes, it gets very expensive very fast.
Right.
And so that's why anthology shows in the Star Trek universe are hard. They're tough.
Yeah, and Brian Fuller originally pitched an anthology show, kind of like American Horror Story, for Star Trek, where you just do one season of different things. So that might have been up your alley, Bean.
Right. Except for Brian Fuller had a lot of other bad ideas. Hey, Christopher Mays for $9.99 says, I really hate Mando season 3. You're not the only one, bro. What's the panel view on why it's so much worse than seasons 1 and 2, despite all the writer credit going to Filoni and Favreau? What changed? What happened? Real quick, I'll answer. They actually tied up Favreau, and he's being held at hostage by Mickey Mouse, and ChatGPT is writing the entire season. But that's my theory. What do you
I think the problem is that they got me, Robert, and Brian to watch seasons 1 and 2, but they knew Matt wasn't watching season 3. And so they said, well, we're just going to do whatever we can to get him, because it feels like they're pandering to everyone to try to get everybody to watch the show.
You know me, I love season 3. I want more Lizzo. I want more Jack Black.
Yeah.
I want more Baby Yoda.
You guys don't know this, but Matthew Kadish is actually a massive simp for Lizzo. He follows her. He goes to her tours. He's really
Flaming flutes are my thing, man. I can't get enough.
It's real weird. It's really oof.
What do you think of Mandalorian season 3, Rob?
I'm perplexed by the whole thing, to be honest.
It is strange.
I watch it and I'm like, I don't, as far as world building goes, the Mandalorian civilization you see them all training out in their armor on the sand, next to where these creatures apparently prey on them. I still don't understand why haven't they gone back to Mandalore? Like, I know it's bombed out, but no one's there. Like,
right.
They have underground cities they could rebuild. Like, why aren't
There's a planet right next door that's perfectly habitable.
Yeah, with a castle on it.
Yeah.
It used to have a castle on it. That got destroyed. I mean, I honestly, I watched, there's nothing in the show this season that I find remotely believable. Like, there's not been one exchange. Like, was it in this first episode when he goes, or maybe the second episode where he goes and sees Bo-Katan for the first time, and he walks down this really long corridor and he gets to her where she's just lounged over her throne, like she has nothing better to do,
right?
And she doesn't go, can I offer you a drink? I mean, you came all the way here, you through hyperspace. I don't know where you came from. It probably took you a long time. Can I offer you something to drink? Maybe they could walk out on a balcony and have a conversation, but no. And then she says, no, I'm not going with you. And he turns around and walks all the way back down that corridor to get on a ship and leave. And then, of course, the next episode, he has to get Grogu to get in the ship with R5D4 and fly back to her.
Well, also she was pouting because he won the Darksaber and she didn't. And so everyone left her. And then in this episode, he's just like, oh, by the way, she beat the guy that beat me. So this is hers now. And she's like, yay.
And
all the Mandalorians are just like, okay.
You know what it seems like to me? It seems like they handed out assignments to a bunch of writers and said, hey, you get this episode, go do whatever you want, and then come on back together and we'll make it. And it feels like there was no showrunner. So what is John doing? It's a really great question because it feels like there was no showrunner to navigate this thing.
It almost feels like the people who made Book of Boba Fett made this season as well.
Yeah, it really does. And what I don't understand is, you listen to the writers of Star Trek Picard, they all sat in a room on a whiteboard and broke everything down.
Yes.
In my mind, if I was making this show, it's 8 episodes. I'm like, okay, here's the line from where the season begins, and here's the line where it ends. And I would just make check marks, and I would have these things. I want these things to happen. First of all, I don't even know what this season's even about. What's the end game here? What are we supposed to this planet, the Logan's Run planet with
I'll
Lizzo
tell you,
and
Robert,
Jack Black?
Sell more Baby Yoda plushies.
Well, I mean, I don't even. What is the overarching theme? She saw the mythosaur. Now she's friends with the armorer. I mean,
they've actually come out and they've said that it's no longer Din Djarin's story. It's just it's
Mandalorians
jumping to different Mandalorians.
Yeah, I'm just like, since when? Wait a minute. What about the last 2 years?
Right.
It's such a weird. The whole thing is so weird, but there's still no narrative thrust. I never know from one episode to the next, where am I going? I don't think they know either.
It doesn't seem like it. I mean, they had Tim Meadows in one episode. Then you got Jack Black. You've got Lizzo, and you've got
Christopher
Lloyd in one episode, and it's and none of it really made any sense.
And then we go, and meanwhile, back on Coruscant, we're going to go to a different show for half this episode of The Mandalorian.
Was that about?
And then we're going to come back to The Mandalorian already in progress.
Lieutenant Biscuits.
As much crap as we've talked about shows of all time, this may be the worst thing ever. It just keeps getting worse. You got the whole agenda driven. Granted, there may not be any agendas here for this show, social agendas, but it's worse just because it's a terrible story writing.
Dude, the droid bar alone was worthy
bar. Well, get it? Because this bar does serve their kind. Get it?
Get it?
Who's programming these droids to socialize with each other?
They're leaning on the wall. Did you see that? Chilling. What's going on here?
What's up, man?
Why did they have a droid in a morgue where they pull out the table?
I don't know. It's
so weird.
It's I think Brian said something that I caught on to, and he said he thinks that they're trolling us. I think somebody said it's got. Was that you, Matt? So Matt, you said that you think
this episode was so bad that it had to be intentional.
Yeah, because you cannot possibly screw this thing up so bad. And Jon Favreau, I love Jon Favreau. I mean, everything he's done. This is weird. I feel like he's not there. Something must have happened. Maybe Doomcock was right. Maybe him and Kathleen Kennedy really did have it out, and he's like, screw this. I don't want to do this shit anymore. I don't know.
Doomcock was right. Oh no.
I'm perplexed. I get perplexed by a lot of stuff these days, and I look at this and I'm thinking, you've got one of the most valuable IPs in entertainment history right here, and they keep screwing it up. And how do you do that? How do you make the Obi-Wan Kenobi show? Why did you have to put young Princess Leia in there? Why? I mean, who made that choice?
Obi-Wan Kenobi was criminal, man.
Yeah,
that was one of the worst things.
I mean, young Princess Leia just made it worse, and it broke so much canon with Obi-Wan. It's just all bad. I mean, it's not a coincidence. It's not. We all want Star Wars to be good, guys. Right. We don't want it to be bad. So trust me, we're not sitting here trying to find ways to criticize it. It's like doing it to itself. So,
right.
Yeah. Look, I want to love it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Every day I turn it on and I want to love it. I feel that way about Discovery.
I mean,
I've watched every episode of that show.
The fact of the matter is that all the franchises we love at the very top levels are being led by people who don't know what they're doing. Right. If Bob Iger replaced Kathleen Kennedy tomorrow with somebody who was a true fan of the series and actually knew what they were doing, you'd see a turnaround like that.
Yeah,
like
with
same
Mike
thing with
Zero.
Kurtzman. Same thing with Kurtzman. If they replaced Kurtzman with someone who actually respected the IP, like Terry Matalas, you would see tons of great Star Trek coming out. The fact of the matter is that until the top leadership is changed, and not by their appointed successors, but by someone from the outside who actually knows what they're doing, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, it's like modern politics. Like, no one, the only people that get elected in the office are people that have already been there for 50 plus years, or whoever those people have approved to be the next successor. And we're having the same exact problem in Hollywood. Like, most of these franchises aren't being actually led by actual fans or people qualified, but it's by nepotism.
Yeah, it's just, well, it's at the end of the day though, it's like, is this a good story? Have you written a good story here? And the thing is, you can look at other great, The Last of Us and House of the Dragon, both HBO shows. Those are beautifully written shows, beautifully conceived. They knew exactly what they were supposed to be, and they went out and did it. Succession. And when I want to see great writing, look at Breaking Bad, and I want to see
The Wire.
The Wire, Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, The Wire. I want that level of writing on a Star Trek show. Star Trek demands it.
Get
Or
David
Star
Simon
Wars.
to come in and handle the sequel to Solo, where we get to see like the underworld, the criminal underworld to Star Wars.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean
what
that's,
want to see.
and I don't understand why they don't do that. And what's really interesting is you get Andor was an example of, you have somebody, an Academy Award winning screenwriter and director. He hasn't won the Academy Award for directing, but for screenwriting. And they did a show about, they answered a question I've always wondered. How did the Empire after the Empire was created, how did an empire, how was it able to conquer the universe, the galaxy? And you got to see all these mid-level imperial functionaries, and you saw what they did to normal working class people. Yeah. And
Robert,
I think, yeah,
you know how we know Tony Gilroy is a genius? Because he wrote The Cutting Edge.
Well, there you go.
One of the best movies of all time.
I love that movie.
Well, and the thing is, he can make a great skating movie, and he can make a great George Clooney movie. So that's a real writer.
Yeah, I feel like Andor got a lot of bad takes on it. Like, I think it's a brilliant show, but I think like if we'd been allowed to binge it as opposed to the week-to-week release,
right,
people would have had a very different view of how good Andor was.
Oh, I agree. But I mean, what I thought was so interesting about it is what we want is that what that show gave us is, if you're paying attention, how did the Empire come to power? How was it able to control the galaxy with an iron fist or an iron grip? Mm-hmm. And seeing like Daedra, that she was a great character, she-wolf of the Empire. I mean, she was what she wanted to do, and how people ended up in the places that they were, and why did the Empire. That was a fascinating insight into the Star Wars universe,
the bureaucracy.
Well,
all
even
of that.
episode 3 of was it 3? Episode 3 of The Mandalorian. I was like, I could watch this show. When it went off on the side tangent, and you're looking at the repatriation of Imperial, people.
Well, it felt like Andor
like, okay.
1.2.
Yeah, that's what.
Maybe that's why I liked it. I'm like, well, okay, I can see where this is going, but what the hell does it have to do with Mandalorian? Nothing. So that was kind of where we're at.
Yeah, you're right. Justin Cole for $2. I canceled Disney Plus after one episode of Mando. Done.
I tell you what, Dustin, I felt like after the first episode, I'm like, oh, this is not good, because I felt like they were just trying to sell toys. But I gave it a couple more. Actually, I've watched the whole thing, obviously, but you're right. After about episode 3, it was just like
I get kicked out.
I didn't kick you, I promise. Ghost Rider for $2 says, hint, the Force is female, guys. Remember?
Yeah,
we just talked about that.
Well, Princess Leia had the Force in in number 8, so I never understood that. She was Force sensitive, I guess.
Oh yeah, Force. Yeah, when they added in the fact that people can be Force sensitive, so you have the Force and then Force sensitive people. That's just opening the door for all kinds of, free, story plots. You can just run and ram in there,
or float through the space if you need to, back into a spaceship.
Right. Ruse 321 for $10. Rumor has it that Lucasfilm and Kennedy wanted to expand the Mandoverse with more shows and movies, and that threw off the vision that Filoni and Favreau originally had in mind. See Den of Nerds for more info. Interesting.
I don't know about, I don't know if that's necessarily true, because they had their own plans for things. I mean, obviously the Ahsoka, all of it comes out of Filoni's animation, the Clone Wars, Rebels, all of that. So, I think that was Filoni's plan all along, was to expand it. I don't know if they're, now they're talking about Filoni's going to direct a movie winding all of this up. I'm like, by the time they get to the end of it all, is anybody going to, like, look, Ahsoka looks great, but you can make anything look great in a trailer.
Yeah. It does feel like a bunch of spinoff potential, like, because they're going in so many different directions. It feels like, could they do, an Apollo Creed show on that planet, or could they do the whole droid thing off of droids taking over? I mean, it just feels like they're doing something weird. So, I mean, I see where that's coming from, but you probably have the correct of it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about like Andor, to me, the reason I liked it, I thought it was really compelling. You had Mon Mothma's story, you had Luthen's story, you had Cassian's story, and I thought that Luthen was one of the great Star Wars characters of the modern age, and I loved.
I wanted way more of him.
I wanted way more of him too, and I loved Mon Mothma's whole conundrum and what she was dealing with, and then all the Imperial. I mean, Cyril was a punk, but I found myself very invested and fascinated to watch where the story was going.
Yeah, I loved all those like Imperial intelligence meetings where like you got to see the inner workings and like the backstabbing and all that stuff that was going on in the Empire. I found
and the old guy that ran him. I love that guy.
Yeah.
And it was great stuff. Yeah, I thought that was good.
I tell you what, I appreciate you guys. We've been here for 4 hours. You guys are rock stars. And you know what, everybody, you guys here watching that stayed with us, thank you so much for staying with us and asking all these wonderful questions. And do you guys have anything else you want to put out?
I just want good Star Trek, man. That's what I want to put out. Make me something good.
Man, so we got some really good news. We've got you get IMAX coming up, so that's really cool. We've got 2 more episodes remaining, and Matt's gonna set up something in Vegas. We'll put out more information on that. He's working on something that we can do out there, so stay tuned. If you guys haven't gone over to subscribe to the Burnett Network, make sure you do so. Rob's channel.
Thank you.
And yes, absolutely, got to be there. And also at the Salty Nerd Podcast, they have great shows. Make sure you guys go check them out.
We got a live stream going on tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time from our studio, and we're going to be talking about Super Mario Brothers and Disney and all the new Star Wars movies that are supposed to be coming out. We got a lot to talk about tomorrow.
Can't wait to see that studio in person, Matt. Can't wait.
Yeah, I can't wait to have you guys there. Rob, when you come out to Vegas, if you ever want to do a show, like, feel free to use our studio.
Oh, I'd love to come out. I want to come check it out.
Yeah.
I love going to Vegas.
Couple more weeks, right?
Yep. Yeah, man.
All right.
According to the poll, at least 88 of you have stuck out the entire 4 hours. So I'm impressed. Well done.
Yes, and thank you guys, and make sure you come back this Thursday. Come join us 12 o'clock here on this channel, and then next Monday. Oh, and for everybody who was hoping Daniel Davis would be here today, I apologize to you guys. So of course, Professor Moriarty was supposed to be on the show today, but he had to cancel last minute. So he is going to be back in a few weeks. Next week, we've got the Shuttle Podcast, guys. So we're going to have, if you're a fan of Enterprise, then Trip and Malcolm, who they'll be on the show next week. And then we're working on some other special stuff. Hopefully we can get Terry back on the show, hoping after Picard season 3 ends to do like a wrap up on the whole series. So
what are the odds we can get Terry and Doomcock on the same live stream?
Hey, you've never seen them in the same room together.
Terry and Doomcock.
What about Terry and Doom Glock?
Yes, that's
Doom Glock. Doom Chicken.
Hello, Terry.
And one last final super chat here. El Presidente Camacho, you were too generous to us. Thank you so much.
Wait,
for
no,
the
you gotta say it
$20.
right.
That's your thing, man.
Presidente Mountain Dew over Camacho.
Oh man, I love you guys. Appreciate you so much. We'll catch you guys next week. Have a good one.
Adios, muchachos. Wait, where's that thing at? There it is.
If I could cancel